He shattered the car window with his bare elbow, reached into freezing water up to his chest, and grabbed a stranger's hand, a woman he had never seen before and would never ask a single thing from. She was bleeding. She was going under. And every person standing on that road above just watched. But Ethan Carter climbed down anyway, and when the ambulance finally came, when the paramedics pushed through and took over, he simply walked back to his truck, buckled his daughter in, and drove home like nothing had happened. He never gave his name. She never stopped looking for him. And what she found when she did changed everything. Drop a comment right now with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. Every part of this story is worth staying for. The storm came without much warning. That was the thing about Montana. In February, the mountains didn't negotiate. They didn't send gentle previews or polite forecasts. 1 hour the sky was gray and still, and the next it was a wall of white moving so fast it swallowed the road whole. Ethan Carter had driven this stretch of Highway 12 through Black Ridge 1,000 times. He knew every curve, every dip, every place where the guardrail was a little too low and the shoulder dropped off into nothing. He knew it the way a man knows the back of his own hand, not by thinking, but by feel. He had the truck's heater cranked all the way up, and Lily was in the passenger seat with her backpack on her lap and her forehead pressed against the glass watching the snow come down. "It's getting bad," she said. "We're fine," Ethan told her. "You always say that." "Because we're always fine." She pulled her face back from the window and looked at him sideways. She had her mother's eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that seemed to catch light even when there wasn't any. She was 9 years old and already too smart for her own good, or at least too smart for his. Mrs. Harmon said the storm was going to be a category. "Mrs. Harmon has a weather app on her phone," Ethan said. "I have 20 years of driving these roads. I'll take 20 years over a weather app." Lily considered this. What if the app is right? Then we'll deal with it. She turned back to the window. Okay, that was Lily. She pushed, she questioned, she poked at every answer until she found the soft spot, and then when she'd gotten enough out of you, she'd just go quiet and accept it. Not because she was convinced, because she'd decided to trust you anyway. It was the most terrifying quality she had. It was also the thing Ethan loved most about her. He kept both hands on the wheel and his eyes on the road. The wipers were going full speed and barely keeping up. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last 40 minutes. He could feel the truck wanting to slide on the curves, that subtle loosening under the tires that you only recognized if you knew what to feel for. He backed off the gas. "Dad." "Yeah." "Do you think Mom can see the snow from where she is?" The question hit him. The way Lily's questions always hit him sideways, from somewhere he wasn't expecting, right in the part of his chest that never fully healed. "I think she can see everything," he said. Lily nodded slowly. "I think so too." He didn't say anything else. Neither did she. They drove in silence for a minute, and then the road curved around the base of Ridgemont Peak, and the valley opened up below them, and that's when Ethan saw the lights. Not the soft glow of another set of headlights coming toward him. These lights were spinning, tilted, wrong. He hit the brakes before his brain had finished processing what his eyes were seeing. 60 yards ahead, a black SUV had gone through the guardrail. Not through it cleanly, it had clipped the end post, twisted sideways, and gone over the edge at an angle. One rear corner was still visible above the road surface, hooked on a broken section of the railing like something out of a nightmare. The front of the vehicle had dropped into the ravine below, and even through the snow and the dark, Ethan could see the headlights pointing down at the frozen creek at the bottom. "Stay in the truck," he said. "Dad, Lily." His voice was flat and final. "Stay in the truck, lock the doors, and keep the hazards on. Do not get out for any reason." He was already opening his door. "What are you doing?" she called after him. But he was already moving. There were 2 other vehicles pulled over on the shoulder ahead of him, a pickup and a dark sedan, and Ethan could see a man standing at the edge of the road with a phone in his hand, flashlight beam pointed uselessly down into the ravine. A woman was sitting in the open door of the sedan with her hands over her mouth. "Is someone down there?" Ethan shouted over the wind. The man with the phone turned. He was maybe 50, heavy coat, no hat, snow building up in his hair. Yeah. Female driver. Single occupant. I don't know. I think she's conscious. I called 911. They said 20 minutes minimum. 20 minutes. Ethan repeated it not as a question, but as a measurement. He walked to the edge and looked down. The ravine dropped about 30 feet. Not a cliff, more of a steep rocky slope with a frozen creek running along the bottom. The SUV had gone nose first into the embankment, maybe 15 feet down, and the front end was wedged against a cluster of boulders with the creek ice cracked and dark around it. In the glow of the tilted headlights, he could see movement inside. Just barely. But it was there. The temperature out here is 10 degrees, Ethan said. Probably worse with wind chill, the man with the phone said. And that creek's frozen over, which means the ice under the car might not hold. Look, I already called. I know you called. Ethan was already pulling off his heavy outer coat. He thrust it at the man. Hold this. You're not going down there. Yeah, I am. That's crazy. She could die in 20 minutes. Ethan said it simply the way he said most things, not to argue, just to state the fact. Give me your phone. I need the flashlight. The man stared at him. The phone, Ethan said again. The man handed it over. Ethan clipped it to the collar of his flannel shirt, so the beam pointed forward, and got down on his stomach at the edge of the drop. He found a root with his right hand, tested it, then swung his legs over and started down. The slope was a nightmare. Loose shale under a crust of snow and ice-wet rock that offered no grip, roots that held for 2 seconds and then gave way. He slid the last 8 feet on his side and hit the hard frozen creek bank with his shoulder and arm. He lay still for 1 second, catching his breath. Then he got up and moved to the car. The SUV was a late model Range Rover Black, and it had hit the rock formation hard enough to cave in the whole front end. The windshield was cracked in a spiderweb pattern from center to corner. The driver's side window was still intact, but fogged from the inside. Ethan pressed his face to the glass and used the phone flashlight to see through. She was there. Late 20s, maybe 30. Dark hair matted against the side of her face. A thin line of blood from her hairline running down across her cheekbone. Her head was tilted at an angle that made his stomach tighten. Not broken, he told himself. Just dazed, and her lips were moving. She was saying something he couldn't hear. He tried the door handle. Locked or jammed, it didn't matter which, it wasn't opening. He looked around him in the half-dark. 3 feet to his left, a flat rock about the size of a dinner plate, half buried in the creek bank. He pulled it free with both hands, stood back from the window, and swung it into the glass. The first hit cracked it. The second collapsed the center. The third cleared enough to reach through. He cut his forearm on a piece of glass still in the frame. He felt the sting of it and didn't stop. Hey! He reached through and pressed his palm flat against her cheek, warm skin against his freezing hand. Hey, I need you to look at me. Her eyes moved. Slowly, like someone waking up from something very deep. There you are, he said. Can you hear me? Her lips moved again. This time he caught it. Yes. Good. My name is Ethan. I'm going to stay right here with you until help comes. Are you in pain? She blinked. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black in the flashlight beam. There was something in them, not just pain and confusion, but a strange clarity. Like some part of her was watching everything happen from a distance. My chest, she managed. Your chest hurts. Steering wheel. Okay, don't try to move. You might have a cracked rib. Just breathe slow. She closed her eyes. No, he said sharp. Don't do that. Stay with me. Her eyes opened again. Good, he said. Good. What's your name? A pause. Then, Sophia. Sophia. Okay, Sophia. You listening? Yes. Help is coming. Probably 15 minutes, maybe less. I need you to stay awake until they get here. That's your only job right now. Just stay awake. Can you do that? She didn't answer immediately. Sophia. I can do that. Yeah, he said. I think you can. He stayed beside the window with his arm inside his hand against the side of her face, not because it did much for warmth, but because contact mattered. He'd learned that much from the night he sat in a hospital corridor with his daughter shaking apart in his arms. Contact was something real when nothing else was. The wind coming down the ravine was brutal. He had on his flannel shirt, work pants, and boots. That was it. Without the heavy coat he'd left with the man above, every minute on the creek bank was pulling heat out of him like a drain. He was aware of it, the way he was aware of most physical things, as information, as a number on a gauge he was watching, but not yet acting on. He could manage. She was the one who couldn't. "Talk to me," he said. Sophia's eyes were open but heavy. "About what?" "Anything. Where were you going tonight?" A long beat. "Meeting." "What kind of meeting?" "Important." "More important than this." A pause. Then, impossibly given everything, the corner of her mouth moved. Just barely. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. "Probably not." "Probably not," he agreed. "Good answer." He heard movement above him on the slope and looked up. Another man was picking his way down, younger, athletic, moving with purpose. He reached the creek bank and came toward Ethan. "EMT training," the young man said breathlessly. "I was in the car behind you." Ethan stepped aside immediately. "Possible chest trauma from the steering wheel. She's coherent but fading. Temperature in the car's probably close to ambient. She's been in there at least 10 minutes before I got here." The young man nodded and took position at the window. "I got her. You should go up. You're hypothermic." "I'm fine." "Sir, your lips are—" "I said I'm fine." Ethan planted himself 3 feet back and crossed his arms. "You watch her vitals. I'll watch the ice." The young man looked at him for 1 second, reading something in his face, and then turned back to Sophia. Ethan crouched down and pressed his palm against the creek ice, 6 inches from the SUV's front tire. He felt it under pressure, a faint, subtle give. Not breaking, but not solid either. "We need to be ready to pull her out fast if this shifts," he said. Agreed. They waited. It felt longer than 12 minutes. Probably wasn't. Time did strange things when the cold got into you. It stretched and compressed in ways that had nothing to do with clocks. From inside the car, Sophia's voice came through the broken window at irregular intervals. Sometimes a question, "Are you still there?" And every time Ethan answered the same way, "Still here." Once she said, "I don't know your name." He told her. "Ethan. Ethan." She said it like she was filing it somewhere. "You climbed down here." Seemed like the thing to do. Nobody else did. He didn't have an answer for that, so he just said, "Just breathe, Sophia. We're doing fine." The young EMT glanced at him. Ethan looked away. The lights came first, that red and blue strobe cutting through the snow above the ridgeline, and then the sound of voices and boots and equipment. The professional rescue team came down the slope with ropes and a backboard and a level of efficiency that made everything Ethan and the young man had done look improvised and rough, which it was. They worked fast. They had her stabilized, braced, and on the backboard in less than 4 minutes. The whole team moved like a machine, and Ethan stepped back and just let them work. He watched them strap her in. In the confusion of flashlight beams and shouted coordinates and equipment being passed down the slope, he got one last look at her face. She was looking at him, even with the cervical collar on and the oxygen mask being lowered toward her face. Her eyes were tracking him specifically the way people's eyes tracked the last fixed point before they went under. Not the paramedics who were saving her life, not the lights above, him. Her mouth moved. He couldn't hear it over the noise and the wind and the rescue team's communications. But he thought it was, "Thank you." He climbed back up the slope, the same way he'd come down, hands and boots inching up the shale, catching on roots, losing ground twice, and catching himself. He was slower on the way up. His left arm, where he'd cut it on the glass, had stiffened in the cold, and the shoulder he'd hit on the way down was complaining loudly. He ignored both. At the top, the man in the heavy coat was standing there holding Ethan's jacket out to him. "That was—" the man started. "Thanks for holding this." Ethan took the coat, shrugged into it, and handed the man's phone back. The paramedics are going to want to... I'm good. He walked back to his truck. Lily had done everything right. Hazards on doors locked, sitting exactly where he'd left her. When he opened the driver's side door, the first thing she did was look at his arm. You're bleeding. Little bit. Dad. It's nothing. It'll close on its own. There's a first aid kit in the glove. Lily. He got in, shut the door, and put both hands on the wheel for a moment. Just breathed. I know where the first aid kit is. I'll deal with it when we get home. Okay? She studied him the way she always studied him, serious measuring. Is the lady okay? She's going to be fine. The paramedics are with her. Were you scared? He thought about it. Not the kind of thought that was actually searching, the kind that was just being honest with itself. A little, he said. Yeah. Lily reached over and put her small hand over his on the steering wheel. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. He pulled back onto the highway and drove. They didn't talk much on the way home. The radio played something low and country that Lily usually complained about, but tonight she let it go. The snow kept falling. The highway was nearly empty. Black Ridge proper was a town of about 4,000 people, if you counted the outlying ranches and the mountain communities that considered themselves part of it, but didn't really like coming into town. It had a grocery store, a diner, 2 churches, a volunteer fire department, and Ethan's shop, Carter's Auto, which sat on the corner of Maple and 2nd, in a building that had been a gas station 30 years ago, and still smelled faintly like it. The house was 3 blocks from the shop. It was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that needed new counters, a living room that served as Lily's art studio whenever she spread her supplies across the floor, which was most of the time. It wasn't much by any measuring stick that involved numbers. But when Ethan pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, the porch light was on, and in the yellow glow of it with the snow coming down, it looked like exactly what it was. Home. He cleaned the cut on his arm over the kitchen sink, while Lily stood on a chair beside him and supervised with far more intensity than the situation required. You need stitches, she informed him. I don't need stitches. It's still bleeding. It's almost done bleeding. You always say almost. Because things are always almost done. He dried his arm and pressed a folded piece of gauze against the cut. Hand me the tape. She handed him the tape. Then she watched him dress the wound with the critical eye of someone who'd seen enough of her father's casual approach to self-care to have formed strong opinions about it. You should have let the paramedics look at you, she said. The paramedics had more important things to do. Like what? Like taking care of the woman in the car. Lily was quiet for a moment. Who was she? I don't know. You didn't ask. She was a little busy, sweetheart. Lily considered this. She had a habit when she was thinking seriously of pressing her lips together and looking slightly to the left, as if the answer might be hiding just outside her direct line of sight. Will we ever know? She asked. Probably not. Does that bother you? Ethan looked down at her. Really looked at her, this small, serious, impossibly perceptive person who had somehow come from him and from Claire, and was now her own entire self, with her own thoughts and her own questions, and her own way of making him feel like the most accountable man in the world. No, he said, and he meant it. That was the thing about doing something, because it was right, you didn't need the ending to justify it. The act was already complete. What came after didn't change what it was. Lily seemed to accept that. She got down from the chair and went to the refrigerator and started pulling things out with the focused efficiency of someone who had already decided what dinner was going to be. Mac and cheese, she called over her shoulder. Mac and cheese, he agreed. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked at his hands. They were still cold, even after the warmth of the house. The cut was slowing down. The shoulder would be sore for a week. He'd get through it the same way he got through everything, one morning at a time, one repair at a time, one school pickup and one bedtime, and one quiet evening at a time. The woman in the car. Sophia was somewhere in the hospital right now, being checked over by people who knew exactly what they were doing. She was going to be fine. He was sure of it. She had that quality in her eyes, that clear watching quality that belonged to people who had too much fight in them to go quietly. He hoped she was warm. He hoped someone was with her. He got up and started helping with dinner. 3 days later, the storm broke, and Blackridge dug itself out. The shop reopened on a Wednesday. Ethan had 2 oil changes, a brake job, and a transmission rebuild waiting for him, and he worked through all of it in the methodical way. He worked through everything, starting at the beginning, doing each thing completely before moving to the next, not rushing. The radio was tuned to a talk station out of Billings that he mostly used for background noise. Lily was at school. At noon, he went inside and made coffee and stood at the workbench eating a sandwich and going over the week's invoices. The numbers were not good. They were rarely good, but this month they were particularly not good. Parts prices had gone up again, and 2 of his regular customers had moved away over the winter one to be closer to family one, because the job market in Blackridge had dried up another notch. The transmission rebuild he was doing was for an 80-year-old man named George Briley, who would pay half up front and the rest whenever, which in George's case historically meant Christmas or a grandchild's birthday, whichever came first. Ethan did not pursue it. George had known Claire. George had brought food to the house for 3 weeks after she died and never once asked to be thanked. He went back out to the shop and got under the Briley transmission. He was still there at 2:30 when he heard a car pull up outside. He slid out from under the vehicle and stood up, wiping his hands on the rag he kept tucked in his back pocket. Through the open bay door, he could see a vehicle he didn't recognize, something new or clean, despite the road salt. Not a truck. A rental, probably. A woman got out of the driver's side. Late 20s. Dark hair. She moved carefully, like someone whose body was still reminding her of something, and she was dressed in clothes that were functional but understated: good jeans, a good coat, simple boots. Nothing about her announced anything. But something about her was just slightly off for Blackridge, something in the precision of it, the deliberateness. She looked at the shop sign. Then she walked in. "Hi," she said. Ethan looked at her, and the world did something strange and sideways. He knew her. Not from her name, or from any context that made rational sense. He'd spent 20 minutes with her in the dark, through a broken car window, her face half obscured by blood and shadow and a flashlight at the wrong angle. He hadn't expected to recognize her if he ever saw her again. But he recognized her. The eyes mostly. That dark watching quality. That way of being present in a way that felt like assessment. I didn't say anything. He just waited. "I was wondering if you could look at my car," she said. Her voice was steady, no indication she recognized him in return. "I'm passing through and I think I might have a coolant issue. There's a warning light." Ethan folded the rag over his belt. "Drive it in." She went back out and pulled the car into the bay. He checked the coolant reservoir. It was low, not critical, and ran through the rest of the basics while she stood to the side with her hands in her coat pockets. "Reservoir's low," he said. "I'll top it off. Probably a slow leak somewhere in the system. Could be a hose clamp, could be the radiator cap, hard to say without a pressure test." "How long would that take?" 20 minutes, half hour." "Can you do it today?" "Yeah." He looked at her. "You can wait inside if you want. There's bad coffee." She almost smiled. "Bad coffee is fine." She went inside and sat in the waiting area, 2 chairs and a small table with magazines from last year, and Ethan ran the pressure test and thought about what to do. He thought about Lily asking, "Will we ever know who she was?" He thought about his own answer. "Probably not." "Does that bother you?" No. He found the problem. Small crack in the upper radiator hose close to the clamp. Nothing dramatic. He fixed it in 8 minutes, topped the coolant, ran the engine to temperature, checked the pressure again. Clean. He went inside and told her what it was. "What do I owe you?" she asked. He named a number. Fair, but not inflated. She paid cash, counted exactly, and held it out to him. "I didn't catch your name," she said. He took the money. "Ethan." Something happened in her face. The most controlled, subtle, fractional thing. Just a tightening around the eyes, and then an immediate release. It lasted maybe half a second. He wouldn't have caught it if he hadn't been watching. She was watching him too. "I'm Sarah," she said. He nodded. "Safe drive, Sarah." She walked to her car. She paused with her hand on the door and looked back at him just for a moment, that same quality of looking from the ravine, and then she got in and drove away. He watched the car until it was gone. Then he stood in the empty bay for a long moment, with his hands in his pockets and the pressure test gauge hanging from the bench beside him. He wasn't sure what he knew. He wasn't sure what she knew. He wasn't sure if the convergence of coincidences that had just walked through his shop door and paid him $42 for a hose repair was the universe being strange, or if something else was happening here that he didn't have the full picture of. What he was sure of was this: her name wasn't Sarah. He didn't know how he knew it, only that he did the same way he knew when an engine was wrong before he could see it, just from the sound of it and the particular quality of the wrongness. Something in her had recognized something in him, and the name she'd given him was the name of someone buying herself a little time. Time for what he couldn't say. He went back to the Briley transmission. At 3:15, Lily came in through the shop's side door with her backpack on and her scarf wrapped twice around her neck, which she always did in winter, regardless of the temperature. "Anything interesting today?" she asked. "Coolant leak," he said. "That's it. That's it." She dropped her backpack on the chair inside the door and started unpacking her homework onto the workbench, which she was not supposed to do, but which Ethan had long since stopped fighting. "Mrs. Harmon said the woman from the crash is out of the hospital," Lily said without looking up. He paused. "Where'd she hear that?" "The news, I think. Mrs. Harmon watches everything." Lily uncapped a pencil and looked at her math sheet. "She said the woman was somebody important, like a big company or something." "Mrs. Harmon doesn't know who she was." She looked it up. Lily frowned at a problem. She said the SUV that crashed was tracked to some big technology person, a CEO. Ethan didn't say anything. "Did you know?" Lily asked. "No." She looked up at him then. Those gray-green eyes reading him the way they always read him. "Are you going to find out?" He thought about a woman with dark eyes paying cash and giving a name that wasn't hers. "She found me first," he said. Lily stared at him. "Forget it," he said. "Do your homework." She looked at him for one more second. That look, that meant "I won't forget it, but I'll pretend to," and turned back to her math. Ethan picked up his wrench and got back to work. Outside the bay door, the last of the February. Snow was melting off the edge of the roof in slow, steady drops, and somewhere on the highway south of town, a woman who had given him a false name was driving away with her hand on the wheel and something in her eyes that looked, if you knew what to look for, like the beginning of a plan. She came back 4 days later. Ethan was under a Ford F-150 with a flashlight in his teeth and grease up to his elbows when he heard the car pull in. He knew before he slid out that it was her. He couldn't explain how. The engine sound was the same rental car, a particular hum that didn't belong in Blackridge, and something in him had been half expecting it, the way you half expect a storm you can smell coming but can't yet see. He slid out from under the truck and stood up. She was standing at the bay entrance with her hands in her coat pockets, and this time she didn't have a story ready. She didn't say anything about a warning light or a coolant issue. She just stood there looking at him the way she'd looked at him through the broken car window, with that careful measuring quality that made him feel like she was taking inventory. "You came back," he said. "I did." "Coolant holding up?" "The car's fine." He wiped his hands on the rag and waited. She stepped forward a half step. "I want to be honest with you." "That would be different," he said. She didn't flinch. "My name isn't Sarah." "I know." Something crossed her face, surprise, but controlled, pulled back immediately. "How long have you known?" "Since you told me." She was quiet for a moment. "And you didn't say anything?" "It wasn't my business." He tossed the rag on the bench and looked at her directly. "What is your name?" She held his gaze for a long beat. "Sophia Whitmore." He let the name sit there. He'd heard it after Lily's comment about the news. He'd done exactly one internet search the night after the fake Sarah visit, just enough to confirm what he already suspected. Sophia Whitmore, 31 years old, CEO of Whitmore Technologies, worth somewhere in the range of $4 billion, according to the last round of reporting. The kind of name attached to magazine covers and investor conferences, and the sort of world that felt about as real to Ethan Carter as a movie set. "All right," he said. Sophia looked at him. "That's it, all right. What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Most people say something." "Most people probably haven't met you in a ravine," he said. She opened her mouth and then closed it again. For just a fraction of a second, she lost her composure, not dramatically, not in any way that most people would catch, but he caught it. A small loosening. Like a hinge that had been held tight for so long that even a quarter turn of release was visible. "You were there," she said. "That night." "Yes." "You pulled me out." "Kept you company," he said. "The paramedics pulled you out." "You broke the window." "It needed breaking." She stared at him. "Why are you minimizing it?" "Because it's the accurate version." He moved to the side bench and started cleaning up the tools he'd been using, not to avoid her, just because his hands needed something to do. "I did what anyone would have done." "No one else did." The statement landed and sat there. He didn't have an answer for it the same way he hadn't had an answer when she'd said it to him through the window in the dark. He just let it be true and moved on. "How did you find me?" he asked. "Traffic cameras on Highway 12, your truck's plates. It took my team about 6 hours." "Your team?" "I have resources." He put down a socket wrench. "I imagine you do." He turned to face her. "So you have cameras and a team and $4 billion, and you used all of it to find a mechanic in Black Ridge, Montana." "Yes." "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the floor of the shop, at the oil stains, and the tire marks, and the particular chaos of a working garage, and then back at him. "Because I needed to know if you were real." He didn't understand that, and his face showed it. "I meet a lot of people," she said. "A lot of them want things from me. Money connections influence access. Nobody does something for me without calculating the return. Not anymore." She paused. "You climbed down into a frozen ravine in a blizzard, and you didn't even give me your name. I needed to know if that was real, or if I was wrong about it. And now? Now I think you might be the strangest person I've ever met." Despite himself, Ethan almost smiled. "I get that a lot." She looked at him, and for the first time, something in her face shifted from careful to something slightly more open. It wasn't warmth exactly. She wasn't there yet. It was more like the moment before warmth, the moment of deciding. "I'd like to explain myself," she said. "Why I came here under a false name, if you'll let me." I thought about it for exactly as long as it took him to decide the honest answer. "All right," he said. "You can help me close up, and then I'll make you real coffee instead of the bad stuff." She blinked. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. A door. Anger, maybe." "I'm not angry." He grabbed the shop keys off the hook. "I'm curious." They closed up the bay together, him rolling the heavy door down her standing back, but not hovering the way people sometimes did when they didn't know what to do with themselves. She was watching him work, he noticed. Not impatiently, just watching. Inside the small office that connected to the shop. He made coffee in the old percolator that was older than Lily, and made better coffee than it had any right to, and he handed her a mug and sat across from her at the desk he used for invoices and estimates. "Talk," he said, and she did. She told him about waking up in the hospital with a bruised sternum, 2 cracked ribs, and a concussion mild enough that the doctor called it a gift, given the circumstances. She told him about the hospital room, about lying there in the institutional quiet, the machines beeping their steady rhythms, and feeling for the first time in 3 years something she couldn't immediately name. She said it took her 2 days to identify it. It was stillness. The particular stillness of having had something enormous almost taken from you. She told him about the investigation her security team ran. The cameras. The plates. Ethan Carter, sole proprietor of Carter's Auto, Black Ridge, Montana. Widowed. 1 daughter. Owner of a building he'd bought with a business loan 6 years ago, that he was 3 payments behind on a fact she mentioned quietly and without the inflection of judgment. He caught that. "You know about the loan. I know a lot about you," she said. "I'm sorry. I wasn't looking to have leverage. I was just trying to understand who you were. And everything I found made me more confused." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "You're not rich. You're barely keeping this shop running. You have a daughter with medical expenses that are stretching you thin. You had every reason to stand at the top of that road and wait for the ambulance like everyone else did." A pause. "Why didn't you—" Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at his coffee, then at her. "You want the honest answer?" "Yes." Because Lily was watching. Sophia stared at him. "My daughter was in the truck," he said. "She was 9 years old and she was watching her father stand at the edge of a road, deciding whether to do the right thing or the easier thing. I didn't have a choice. Not really." He took a drink of coffee. "Not one I could have lived with." She didn't say anything for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the front window, and somewhere on Maple Street a truck went by, and its headlights swept briefly through the office. "Your daughter," Sophia said finally. "Lily." "Yeah. Is she healthy? You mentioned medical expenses." His jaw tightened. "Not much, just enough." "She's fine." Sophia heard what he wasn't saying, or at least she read the tightening accurately enough not to push. She changed direction instead. "I want to offer you something," she said. "And I need you to hear me out before you answer." He waited. "The guardrail that your truck went through." She stopped. "I'm sorry. The guardrail that the Range Rover went through. The county had 3 maintenance requests on that section. All 3 were deferred. I have lawyers who can make that into something, but what I'd rather do is more direct." She looked at him steadily. "I want to make sure you're compensated. For what happened. For what you did. There's a number my people put together that reflects—" "No," he said. "Ethan, no." He set the mug down, not hard, just with a finality that had no room in it. "I don't want your money. It's not charity, I know what it is." He looked at her directly. "It's the way people like you resolve things that make them uncomfortable. Something happens that doesn't fit into the system of exchange. You're used to someone does something with no calculation attached to it, and it bothers you because you don't know where to file it. So you find a number that makes the file close." He shook his head. "I didn't help you to open an account." The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. This one had weight. Sophia put her mug down very carefully. Her voice, when she found it, was quiet. "That was accurate," she said. "I don't mean it as an insult." "I know." She looked at him. "That almost makes it worse." He almost smiled again. "Are you always this honest?" "Almost never," she said. The sound came without warning. The side door swinging open with a bang and a rush of cold air, and then Lily was in the doorway with her backpack half unzipped and her scarf unwound from one side, and her eyes going immediately to the stranger sitting across the desk from her father. She stopped. Sophia looked at her. Lily looked at Sophia. "Who are you?" Lily said. Sophia opened her mouth, and before she could answer, Lily looked at her father with the expression she used when she had already assessed a situation and was waiting for confirmation. "Is she the lady from the car?" Lily asked. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Sophia. "Yeah," he said. "She is." Lily set her backpack down, pulled out the chair by the door, and sat in it with the posture of someone who had decided to stay. She looked at Sophia with the level, slightly unnerving directness that she'd inherited from her mother and refined on her own. "You're okay," she said. "I am," Sophia said. "Thanks to your dad." "He doesn't take credit," Lily said. "He never does. It's annoying." "Lily," Ethan said. "It's true." She kept looking at Sophia. "He came home with a cut on his arm, and he wouldn't let me put a proper bandage on it. He said he was fine like 4 times. "That sounds right," Sophia said. Something happened in that moment that Ethan noticed, but couldn't have articulated a small, quiet alignment between his daughter and this woman he barely knew. Not dramatic. Not sentimental. Just two people looking at each other and finding that the other one was someone they could probably talk to. It unsettled him more than anything else had. "I should go," Sophia said and stood. "You don't have to," Lily said with the lack of social filter that was either a 9-year-old's prerogative or her particular genius. "Lily," Ethan said again. "What she came all the way here. She should at least stay for dinner." "She doesn't want to stay for dinner." "Actually," Sophia said. They both looked at her. She looked slightly surprised at herself. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "You can stay," Lily said with the decisiveness of someone who had already settled the question. "Dad makes good pasta. It's the one thing he's actually good at in the kitchen." "The one thing," Ethan said dryly. "The one reliable thing," Lily corrected. She stood up, picked up her backpack. "I have homework, but I'll be done in an hour." She looked at Sophia with a seriousness that didn't belong on a 9-year-old's face. "You should stay." She went inside. Ethan and Sophia stood in the office in the particular silence that follows a child saying the thing that adults were circling around. "You don't have to," Ethan said. "I know." Sophia picked up her coat from the back of the chair. "But I think I'd like to." He looked at her for a moment. At the careful way she was holding herself like someone who had learned not to want things too openly, because wanting things opened you up to the calculation of whether you'd get them. He recognized it the way you recognize something you'd seen in a mirror a long time ago. "All right," he said. "Come on." Dinner was pasta with tomato sauce from scratch, which Lily insisted on specifying to Sophia as they sat at the kitchen table from scratch, not from a jar. He won't use the jar, and garlic bread that came from a bag, which Lily reported with the same specificity, apparently committed to a comprehensive assessment of her father's cooking capabilities. Sophia sat at the table and watched them navigate each other, the small automatic shorthand of a father and daughter, who had been each other's primary company for long enough that they'd developed a language of gesture and half-sentence and unfinished references that landed fully because they didn't need completing. She watched Ethan reach across the counter to turn down the heat under the sauce without looking, his eyes still on Lily, who was describing something that had happened at school involving a hamster and a fire drill in a way that had him struggling not to laugh. She watched Lily glance at her father to see if he was listening and find him already looking back at her. She didn't say much during dinner. She didn't need to. Lily had enough conversational momentum for all three of them, moving from the hamster story to a book she was reading to a question about whether Sophia had ever been to Montana before, delivered with the casualness of someone who genuinely wanted to know. "Once," Sophia said. "A ski trip, years ago." "Did you like it?" "I didn't get to see much of it." She paused. "I was working most of the time." Lily processed this. "On the ski trip." "I was younger. I thought working all the time was—" She stopped. "I thought it was necessary." "Isn't it?" "No," Sophia said. "I know that now." Lily accepted this with the simplicity of someone who had always known it and was glad the adult had finally caught up. After dinner, Lily took her mother's old camera from the shelf, a film camera battered and beautiful, and showed it to Sophia with both hands, the way you carried something irreplaceable. She explained without sentimentality that it had been her mother's, that she was learning to use it, that she'd already shot 2 rolls of film and gotten exactly 4 pictures she was happy with. Sophia held the camera carefully. "What do you take pictures of?" "Things that matter," Lily said simply. "My dad working, the shop, the mountains. Once there was a fox outside the window, and I almost got it, but the film advance stuck." "The important ones are always the hardest to get," Sophia said. Lily looked at her steadily. "Yeah," she said. "That's what I think too." Ethan was washing dishes at the sink, and Sophia glanced at him, at the set of his shoulders, at the way he was listening to every word of the conversation while pretending to focus on the plates, and she felt something shift inside her chest that she didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't attraction exactly. Not yet, or not only. It was more like recognition. The recognition of something she had stopped believing existed. She left at 9. Ethan walked her to the car, which was parked on the street in front of the shop, and they stood for a moment in the cold. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Lily invited you." You cooked. He put his hands in his pockets. You're welcome. She looked at the shop front, the sign dark now. The bay doors closed the building that was simultaneously a business and a life. Can I ask you something? Depends. Why are you 3 payments behind on the loan? I was quiet for a moment. You said you weren't looking for leverage. I'm not. I'm asking because I want to understand. She looked at him. You run a good shop. You're clearly skilled. The town isn't that small. What's happening? He looked at the sky. Clear tonight, the stars sharp and crowded, the way they only got this far out from the city. After Claire died, he said, Lily had some health issues. Nothing, she's okay, she's fine. But there were 2 hospitalizations, and a specialist in Billings, and a round of tests that the insurance covered about 60% of. He was quiet for a second. I made choices about what to pay. The loan deferred. I'll catch it up. How? By catching it up. He looked at her. That's generally how it works. She heard the wall in that gentle but real, and she didn't push through it. She filed it. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She got in the car, and he stood on the sidewalk, and she started the engine, and then she stopped and rolled down the window. I'm going to come back again, she said. He looked at her without surprise. I figured. Is that all right? He thought about Lily showing her the camera with both hands, about the way Sophia had held it. Yeah, he said. It's all right. She drove away, and he stood on the sidewalk until the taillights were gone. Inside the house, he could see the kitchen light was still on, and through the window, Lily was back at the table with her sketchbook drawing something with the focused intensity that meant she was in a place where the world had gone quiet and good. He watched her for a moment. Then he went inside. She's coming back, Lily said without looking up. How do you know that? Because she looked at you like someone who wants to know more. She turned a page in the sketchbook. Mrs. Harmon says that's a sign. Mrs. Harmon needs a hobby that doesn't involve other people's business. She has 17 cats, Lily said. So technically, go to bed, Lily. She capped her pen, closed the sketchbook, and stood up. She came to him at the doorway and wrapped her arms around his waist, brief and hard, the hug of someone who had a lot of feeling and expressed it in short, dense bursts and then let go. Night, Dad. Night, sweetheart. She went to her room. He stood in the kitchen for a while in the quiet. He looked at the table where 3 people had sat for dinner. He looked at the spot where Lily had held the camera out with both hands. He looked at nothing in particular for a while, and then he shut off the light and went to bed. She came back that Thursday and the Thursday after that. The pattern established itself without either of them naming it, which was how Ethan preferred things to establish themselves. She arrived mid-afternoon when the shop was in its slower hours and Lily wasn't yet back from school. She would sit in the office or sometimes in the shop itself. She'd found an old stool that she'd moved to a corner, and she just sat there while he worked and they talked. She asked him questions, and most of the time he answered them honestly. He told her about Claire, not all of it, not the bottomless part, but the shape of it. That they'd met in Billings at 23, and she'd told him on the 3rd date that he was the quietest, loud person she'd ever met, which he still didn't fully understand, but had always loved. That she'd been an art teacher. That Lily had her eyes and her patience, and her habit of keeping the important things close to the chest until she'd made up her mind about them. Sophia listened, the way she did everything with a quality of attention that felt like it had been trained by years of having to extract accurate information from people who weren't giving it cleanly. He recognized it as a professional skill that had also become a personal one. In return, she gave him things. Not money she seemed to understand clearly that was closed, and she didn't push on it. She gave him pieces of herself instead, which he suspected she did less frequently. She told him about her father, Daniel Whitmore, who had built the first iteration of the company from nothing, and who had, according to Sophia, told her from childhood that she was the one who would carry it forward, not as encouragement, but as instruction. She'd carried it forward. The company had tripled in size under her leadership. Her father had told her 3 months before he died that she'd done exactly what he'd wanted. Was that enough? Ethan asked the second Thursday, elbow deep in a carburetor. I thought it was, she said from her stool. Then he died, and the company kept going, and I kept running it. And one day, I was sitting in a board meeting, and I realized I hadn't talked to a friend. A real friend, not a colleague, not an investor, in about 14 months. He looked up at her. What did you do? Called the meeting to order, she said. And kept going. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he went back to the carburetor. That's a lonely way to live, he said. Yes, she said quietly. It is. Lily, when she got home, had taken to sitting near Sophia at the kitchen table during homework without much preamble. She would spread her books out, ask Sophia occasionally if she knew anything about fractions, or the water cycle, or the causes of World War I, and receive whatever answer came back with the level assessment of someone deciding if it was adequate. Usually she found it adequate. Once she didn't, and told Sophia exactly why, and Sophia had laughed a real laugh, unguarded, that startled all three of them with how different it sounded from the controlled version. Ethan had looked up from the stove when he heard it. Lily had looked at him. He'd looked away. 3 weeks in on a Tuesday, that was not their established day. Sophia's car pulled up, and Ethan was at the counter doing invoices, and through the glass, he saw her sitting in the car for 3 minutes before she got out. Not making calls, not looking at her phone, just sitting. Like someone gathering something they weren't sure they had enough of. When she came in, her face was different. He couldn't precisely describe the difference, only that the careful management of it was off by a degree. Like a painting, hung 1 degree from level, which you notice only because you've been looking at it long enough. Rough day, he said. She sat down in the invoice chair. I have a board meeting next week. There's a faction that wants to push me toward acquisition of a company I don't think we should acquire. And there's another faction that agrees with me, but can't say so publicly. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. And both factions are waiting to see which way the votes fall before they commit, which means I'm walking into a meeting where nobody's said anything true to me in 6 days. He put down his pen. What do you want to do about the acquisition? Block it. So block it. She looked at him. It's not that simple. Is it not? Or have you been told it's not for long enough that you believe it now? She was quiet. You run the company, he said. Don't you? Technically. Technically and actually. She closed her eyes for a moment, opened them. I miss talking to someone who doesn't have a stake in my answer. I don't have a stake in your answer, he said. Block the acquisition. Something in her face changed. The degree off quality shifted back toward level. Okay, she said. Okay, he said, and picked up his pen. She sat in the office for another hour while he did invoices, and she made calls. 3 of them, each one short and direct. And when she was done, she put the phone in her coat pocket and looked at him. I blocked it, she said. Good. The faction that secretly agreed with me just came out and agreed with me. Good. The other faction is angry. They'll survive. She almost smiled. Then she did smile, a real one, not the controlled version. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, and also paradoxically more like herself, whoever that person actually was under the management and the measurement. You're very strange, she said. You said that the first day. I meant it the first day, and I mean it now. She stood. Same time Thursday. Shop's open, he said. She left, and he looked at the invoice in his hand that he'd been staring at for 40 minutes without actually doing anything to, and he put it down and rubbed the back of his neck. He was in trouble, and he knew it. Not because of her money, not because of her world, not even because of the complications that came attached to a person like Sophia Whitmore walking into a life like his. Because of the way Lily lit up when Sophia's car pulled in. Because of the way Sophia held a coffee mug with both hands like she was cold all the way through and the warmth was something to hold on to. Because of the way she'd said, I miss talking to someone who doesn't have a stake in my answer, with a flatness in her voice that told him it had been a very long time since she'd admitted that to anyone. He was in trouble because he was starting to understand her, and understanding someone was the most dangerous thing there was. The following Tuesday, Lily came home from school quiet. Not sullen. Lily didn't really do sullen, but the particular kind of quiet that meant something was sitting on her that she hadn't decided how to put down yet. She did her homework without asking questions. She ate dinner without the usual running commentary on the relative merits of the food versus what she'd been hoping for. She looked out the window a lot. Ethan let it sit through dinner. He knew Lily. She'd come to it when she was ready. After dinner, she came to the kitchen doorway while he was doing dishes. "Is Sophia our friend?" she asked. He thought about it. "I think so. Like a real friend. Not a..." She searched for the word. "Not a professional connection." "Where'd you hear that phrase?" She used it, describing someone. He dried his hands. "I think she's a real friend." Lily nodded slowly. "She doesn't have many of those." "No," he said. "I don't think she does." "That's sad," Lily said in the matter-of-fact way she said most true things. Then, "I think she likes it here." "Yeah. She looks different when she's here, like she takes something off." She touched her collarbone. "Like a heavy necklace or something, you know." He looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said. "I know." Lily went to bed. He stood at the window for a long time after. The next Thursday. Sophia was later than usual. He'd stopped checking the clock at 4, and by 4:30 was genuinely not thinking about it, which meant he was thinking about it completely. At 4:47 the car pulled in. She came through the door faster than usual, coat half-buttoned, hair catching the wind. She had the look of someone who had been deciding something for the entire drive and arrived having not quite finished deciding. She sat down in the office chair across from him. He waited. "I need to tell you something," she said. "All right." "When I first came here, when I came as Sarah, I wasn't being completely honest about why." He looked at her. "I told you I wanted to know if you were real. That was true, but..." She stopped, started again. "I also had my team look into your financial situation, in detail. And I came here with the intention of finding a way to help you. To make the problem go away, as you said. To close the file." He didn't move. "I had a plan," she said. "It involved the loan and the medical debt and a certain amount of strategic anonymity that would have made it look like something other than what it was. And," he said, "and I didn't do it." She held his gaze. "Because you made me feel like it would be the worst thing I could have done. Before you even knew I was thinking it. You just the way you talked about owing an exchange and what you do and why you do it." She shook her head slightly. "I've given a lot of money to a lot of things and a lot of people. It's never felt the way a bad idea feels until I thought about giving it to you." I was quiet for a long moment. "I appreciate you telling me." "I'm not sure you should." "I do any..." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Did your team ever actually stop looking?" She met his eyes. "No." He nodded, "Just once." "Then we have a problem." "I know?" "Because there's a difference between you knowing my loan situation and you knowing my loan situation." "Yes," she said. "And I need you to call them off, the watching, whatever it is they're doing." She looked at him directly. "Done." "I mean it, Sophia." "So do I." She held his gaze without wavering. "I mean it." He looked at her for a long moment, reading her the way he read engines, listening for the particular quality of the sound. What he found was the same thing he'd found the very first night, that clear watching quality. That person behind the management who was real and present and trying in her imperfect way to be honest. "All right," he said. "All right?" She looked slightly off balance. "That's it. What do you want, a lecture? Maybe a little bit of one." "You've already given it to yourself," he said. "Better than I could have." He picked up his coffee mug. "You want to stay for dinner?" She looked at him. Something in her eyes went very still and then came loose. "Yeah," she said. "I do. Lily's making us do breakfast for dinner. Fair warning. I love breakfast for dinner. Don't tell her that. She'll add pancakes. I love pancakes." He stood up. "God help me," he said, and went to start the coffee. Behind him, he heard her laugh, the real one, unguarded, the one that changed her whole face, and despite everything, Despite the complications and the wariness and the slow, careful thing he was trying not to examine too closely, he smiled. Lily added the pancakes. Nobody complained. And somewhere between the eggs and the syrup, and Lily's detailed explanation of why buttermilk pancakes were scientifically superior to regular pancakes, something shifted between the three of them quietly without announcement, like a current changing direction, underground. Something that felt almost dangerously like belonging. The Pancake Thursday became a standing thing. Not because anyone officially declared it. Not because Ethan said yes or Sophia asked permission. It just happened the way the Thursday visits had happened, by accumulation, 1 week at a time, until the absence of it would have required an explanation that nobody wanted to give. Lily started setting 3 plates without being told. Ethan noticed the first time she did it. He didn't say anything. He just got the 3rd glass out of the cabinet and put it on the table, and they moved around the kitchen the way they always had. Except now, there was someone else in the orbit of it, and she fit there in a way that had stopped surprising him and started unsettling him instead. Because surprise you could manage. Surprise was just the first contact with something new. Unsettled meant it had gotten past the outer layer. It was a Thursday in late March, 6 weeks since the first real dinner, when Sophia showed up 40 minutes early. She had coffee from the gas station 2 miles down, because she'd been driving and hadn't wanted to stop thinking long enough to make it at the rental, which she'd extended 3 times now without discussing it with him, but which he'd tracked the same way he tracked everything quietly in the back of his mind, adding it to the picture. She handed him one of the cups and sat on the stool in the shop while he worked on a Chevy Silverado with a transmission that had been giving its owner polite warning signs for 8 months before finally going silent in the middle of Main Street. "I talked to my VP of operations this morning," she said, "and he wants me to come back to San Francisco, in person. There are things that need FaceTime, and I've been remote long enough that some of the board members are starting to—" She stopped. "Whisper." Ethan kept his hands on the transmission housing. "When?" He said next week. He felt the information land, but didn't let it show on his face. "So go." "I know." She held the coffee cup. "I know I should. But—" The but hung in the air for a moment. "I don't want to be away from—" She stopped again. Started differently. "I've been more productive here than I've been in 2 years. I've made better decisions here than I made in the last 18 months in San Francisco. My head is clearer. My thinking is—" She paused. "Different." He slid out from under the Silverado and sat up looking at her. "That's not an answer to why you don't want to go." She met his eyes. "No," she said. "It's not." He waited. "I don't want to lose this," she said quietly. "Whatever this is, I don't know what to call it. But I don't want to get back into that world and have it close over me like water, and 3 months from now, not be able to remember what it felt like to sit in someone's garage and drink bad coffee and have a 9-year-old correct my pancake methodology." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, wiped his hands on the rag and said, "Go to San Francisco." She stared at him. "Do what you need to do," he said. "Handle the board. Handle the whispers. Do your job." He tossed the rag on the bench. "And then come back." "What if—" "Sophia." His voice was quiet and direct. "You're not someone who runs from things. You're someone who was running before I met you. There's a difference." She looked at him for a long beat. "How do you know that?" "Because the night I met you, you were driving alone through a Montana blizzard to get to a meeting." He picked up his coffee. "People who run from things don't push toward them. They just choose the wrong things to push toward." She was very still. "That's the most you've said about me at once." "Probably." "Is that what you think I was doing, pushing toward the wrong things?" "Past tense," he said. "I think you were." The shop was quiet, except for the wind outside and the occasional metallic click of the building settling. "Past tense," she repeated softly, like she was deciding whether to keep it. She left for San Francisco that Sunday. He drove her to the rental car return she'd asked, which meant she wanted to ask something on the drive and was working up to it, which he'd learned was her pattern. She asked halfway to the airport, "Will you tell Lily I'll call her?" He glanced at her. You can tell her yourself. You have her number. She gave me her number. She wrote it on a piece of notebook paper and put it on your stool 3 weeks ago. I assumed you'd seen it. Sophia went very still in the passenger seat. I thought that was a drawing she left by accident. It's a drawing on one side, he said. Her number's on the other. She turned and looked out the window. He could see from his peripheral vision that she was pressing her lips together, the controlled version of something less controlled underneath. I'll call her, she said quietly. Good. He dropped her at the rental return, and she got out and came to the driver's window. She looked at him, and then looked away, and then looked back, and the looking away and back was unlike her, unlike the measured directness she usually operated with, and that alone told him something. Thank you, she said. She stopped. For not making this complicated. He thought about everything that was already complicated that they were both not saying. Sure, he said. She walked away. He watched her go, then pulled back into traffic and drove home. She was gone 11 days. She called Lily twice. He could hear Lily's side of it from across the kitchen, animated and rapid, the way she was when she was genuinely engaged with someone. Lily reported these calls to him afterward, with the same comprehensive thoroughness she applied to everything she considered important. Sophia had been in 3 different meetings in 2 days. Sophia had blocked the acquisition officially. Sophia had told a board member his question was based on a premise that didn't hold up under scrutiny, which had apparently created an extremely satisfying silence in the room. Lily found all of this fascinating. Ethan listened and did the dishes and didn't say much. On the 11th day, her car pulled in at 3 in the afternoon, and she walked into the shop looking like someone who had run a long race and finished it and was still moving on momentum. How'd it go? He asked. Exhausting, she said. Necessary. Successful. She sat on the stool. I missed this. The stool. The quiet. He handed her the coffee from the percolator without being asked, and she took it with both hands the way she always did. They were quiet for a minute. It was the comfortable kind. The board wants me to formalize my base of operations, she said. He looked up. They want a physical headquarters I'm committing to. San Francisco or New York, their preference. She wrapped her hands around the mug. I told them I needed 2 more weeks to decide. Why 2 weeks? She looked at him. You know why. He did. And the weight of knowing it sat in him quietly, neither good nor bad, yet just present, like the early reading on a gauge. He went back to work. She sat on the stool. Outside, the March wind had turned, and you could feel in it the first threadbare edge of something warmer coming. Montana spring, reluctant and brief, and worth waiting for. 2 weeks passed, and on a Wednesday morning, 9 days into those 2 weeks, everything changed. He got the call at 7:43 in the morning while he was opening the shop. The number was the school's main line. His stomach dropped before he answered. It was the school nurse. Lily had collapsed during morning assembly. She was conscious, she was stable. They'd called an ambulance and it was on its way. Ethan should come immediately. He was in his truck in 30 seconds. He drove to the school with both hands white on the wheel, and his mind doing the thing it had learned to do in emergencies, going very still and very fast. At the same time processing without feeling, because the feeling would come later, and there was no use in it now. He'd learned this the night Claire was diagnosed. He'd practiced it every day since. Lily was in the school hallway on a stretcher when he got there. Oxygen mask over her face. 2 paramedics working. She saw him come through the doors, and her eyes went straight to him. Found him with that same immediate fixed quality that his had when he needed something real to hold on to. He got to the stretcher and took her hand. Hey, he said. She pulled the oxygen mask down. I'm okay, she said. Mask on, the paramedic said. She put it back. But her eyes stayed on Ethan's face, reading him, making sure he was all right. Even lying on a stretcher, she was checking on him. He rode in the ambulance. He held her hand the whole way. At the hospital in Billings, they drove 40 miles because the Black Ridge Clinic didn't have what they needed. A cardiologist named Dr. Renner met them within the hour. He was a compact man with steady hands and the particular manner of someone who gave hard information carefully, because he'd learned that how you said it mattered almost as much as what you said. Ethan sat across from him in a small consultation room while Lily was being monitored down the hall. "Your daughter has a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," Dr. Renner said. "It's a thickening of the heart muscle. In many cases, it's manageable. In Lily's case, the thickening has progressed more than we'd expect for her age, and the episode this morning was an arrhythmia, an irregular heart rhythm that in this context is something we take seriously." Ethan listened. He kept his hands flat on his knees. "What's the treatment?" he said. "There are several approaches. Medication is the first line, and we'll start her on that today. But," Dr. Renner met his eyes, "given the degree of progression, I want to be honest with you about what I'm seeing. There's a procedure, septal myectomy, that would address the structural issue more directly. It's open heart surgery. It's not something we recommend lightly." Ethan kept his voice level. "What happens if we don't do it? We manage with medication and monitoring. Some patients do well on that course for years. But Lily's presentation is aggressive. The risk of another arrhythmic event, a more serious one, is significant if we don't intervene." "How significant?" Dr. Renner held his gaze. "Significant enough that I'm telling you about it on day one." Ethan sat with that. He looked at his hands. He thought about Lily pulling down the oxygen mask on the stretcher to tell him she was okay, as if the important thing in that moment was that he not be afraid. "How much?" he said. "The procedure itself, with anesthesia, post-operative care, and the necessary monitoring period." Dr. Renner paused. "We're looking at a range. The low end is around $70,000. That's with ideal insurance coverage." "And my insurance. I've had our billing department pull your policy. With your current coverage, your out-of-pocket maximum applies. But there are gaps in this category of procedure. Realistically, you'd be looking at your portion being..." He glanced at a paper. "Somewhere between $40,000 and $55,000. The number sat in the room like a physical object. Ethan knew to the dollar what he had. Between his checking account, his business savings, and a small savings account he'd been adding to irregularly for Lily's future, he had $11,400 and some dollars. He was also 3 payments behind on a building loan. He did not say any of this. "Can we get started on the medication?" he said. "Yes, we'll start today." "Good." He stood. "I want to see my daughter." He sat with Lily for the rest of that day and through the night. She slept in the early evening, and he sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at her small face, at the way she slept with one hand curled near her cheek, the way she'd been sleeping since she was 3 years old, and felt the fear that he'd been holding at a distance arrive all at once. He let it. He sat with it. He didn't fight it, because fighting it was just a way of not finishing the feeling, and unfinished feelings had a way of choosing their own moment. Then he put it away. Then he thought about $45,000. At 9 o'clock that night, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. "Sophia." A text. "Lily called me before school this morning. Said she wanted to tell me something, but then the bell rang and she said she'd call after school. She hasn't called. Is everything okay?" He looked at the text for a long moment. Then he called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Ethan." "She's okay," he said immediately. "She's stable. We're at Billings General." A sharp intake of breath on her end. "What happened?" he told her. He gave her the information the way he gave hard information, clearly, without softening it so much that it lost its shape, but without any unnecessary weight on top of it either. He told her about the collapse, the diagnosis, the procedure, the timeline. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming," Sophia said. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to." Her voice was even, but underneath it something was moving fast. "I'm coming. I'll be there by morning. What floor?" "Sophia." "What floor, Ethan?" He looked at Lily sleeping in the hospital bed. Fourth, he said. "Room 412. I'll be there." She was there at 6:47 in the morning. He heard her heels in the hallway before the door opened. Fast, purposeful. The sound of someone who had been moving since the phone call. She came in with a coffee in each hand, and she stopped when she saw Lily asleep, and something crossed her face that she didn't try to control. She handed Ethan one of the coffees and sat in the chair against the wall, and they sat together in the quiet of the hospital room while Lily slept. "How are you?" she said quietly. "Fine." She looked at him. "Ethan." "I'm managing," he said. More honest. She nodded. She didn't push further. She just sat there present steady, not performing concern, but actually feeling it, which was different and mattered. At 7:30, Lily woke up. She saw Sophia and her face did the thing it always did when Sophia arrived, that specific, unconscious brightening that Ethan had stopped pretending not to notice. "You came," Lily said. "Of course I came." Sophia moved to the bedside. "How do you feel?" "Tired, kind of embarrassed. I collapsed in front of the whole school." "That's a very dramatic entrance." Lily almost smiled. "I wasn't trying to be dramatic. The best dramatic moments never are." Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, and Lily, with the simple physicality of a child who trusted someone completely, leaned her head against Sophia's arm. Ethan watched them. Something cracked open in his chest very quietly. Dr. Renner came by at 9. He spoke to Ethan in the hallway, while Sophia stayed with Lily, and he confirmed what he'd said the day before, and added one new piece. He'd been in contact with a specialist in Denver who had more experience with pediatric cases of this severity, and he wanted to refer them. "What does that mean for timeline?" Ethan asked. "The consultation would be within 2 weeks. Surgery, if they concur with my recommendation, within 6 to 8 weeks. Ethan did the arithmetic in his head that he'd been doing since the previous afternoon. It still came out the same way. "Okay," he said, "set it up." I went back into the room. Sophia looked at him when he walked in, reading his face with the same precision she applied to everything, and he saw her see the number in his expression. Not the dollar amount, the weight of the number. The particular quality that $45,000 of weight on $11,000 of footing produces in a person's face. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. Lily showed Sophia a drawing she'd been working on in her sketchbook. She'd asked a nurse for paper and a pen, and she'd drawn in the night a picture of the three of them at the kitchen table. Stick figures, but with enough detail that you could tell which was which. Ethan was taller. Sophia had her hair down. Lily had given herself the camera. "You can have it," Lily said. Sophia took it with both hands. "I'm putting this on my wall," she said. "In San Francisco?" Lily asked. Sophia glanced at Ethan, then back at Lily. "Wherever I end up." Lily nodded like this was satisfactory and leaned back against her pillow. At noon, Ethan stepped into the hallway to take a call from his shop's part-time mechanic Ray, who needed to know where a particular part was filed. He was gone 7 minutes. When he came back, the door to 4 to 12 was slightly ajar, and before he pushed it open, he heard Sophia's voice. She was on her phone. "I need the number for the hospital's patient financial services." A pause. "I'll hold." He stood in the hallway. He heard, "This is Sophia Whitmore. I'd like to make an arrangement for a patient in room 412. Lily Carter. I want to—" He pushed the door open. Sophia looked up. She held his gaze for 1 second, one honest, unguarded second, where she wasn't managing anything, and then lowered the phone. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Lily was asleep again. Ethan stepped into the room and let the door close behind him. He looked at her. He looked at his daughter. He looked at Sophia again, and he kept his voice very low, because the control required to keep it low was the only thing between where he was and somewhere he didn't want to go. "I told you no," he said. "I know. I told you no, and you were doing it anyway." "Yes." She held the phone in her hand and didn't look away from him. "And I would do it again." "Sophia, listen to me." Her voice was quiet, but it had steel in it. Not the managed steel she used in boardrooms, but the real kind, the kind that came from somewhere that wasn't strategy. "I know what you're going to say. I've heard it. I understand exchange and debt and the way people use money. It matters." She looked at Lily. "But I am not going to stand here and watch your daughter's heart get worse because you have a principle. The words landed like a hand against a wall. He didn't speak. "This is not about you," she said. "This is not about what you owe me, or what I owe you, or whether the ledger comes out clean. This is about Lily." Her voice cracked on the name. Just barely. She pulled it back. "She is 9 years old, and she needs a surgery, and you cannot pay for it, and I can, and that is the only thing that matters in this room right now." He looked at his daughter, at the small, still face, at the way her hand was curled near her cheek. He looked at the floor. "I can't let you," he said. "Why?" "Because—" He stopped, started again. "Because if you do this, everything changes. Everything between us. The way I look at you. The way I—" He stopped. She took a step toward him. "The way you what?" He didn't answer. "Ethan." Her voice was very quiet. "The way you what?" He looked up at her. At this woman who had come back every Thursday and sat on a stool in his shop and let his daughter put her number on a piece of notebook paper. At this woman who had flown from San Francisco on no notice and sat beside a hospital bed at 6 in the morning with coffee in both hands. At this woman who was standing in front of him right now with a cracked voice and borrowed steel and no playbook for this moment, because this moment wasn't in any playbook she'd ever operated from. "I don't want to lose this," he said, his own words back at him, the ones she'd said weeks ago. She stared at him. "Whatever this is," he said, "I don't want to lose it." She was very still. "If I take your money," he said, "it changes the shape of it. I don't know how. I don't know if we could get back. I know it would be different." "What if I told you," she said carefully, "that it doesn't have to change anything, that I could do this in a way that—" "There's no way to do this that isn't what it is," he said. She looked at him for a long time. "You know what's funny," she said softly. "The thing I've been fighting all my life, the thing I hate most about my world, is that money changes the shape of everything it touches. I hate it. I built systems to try to get around it. I fired people who let it be the first language in every room." She paused. "And here you are, feeling exactly what I've always felt. About my own money." I didn't have anything to say to that. "But she's 9, Sophia said. "Ethan, she's 9 years old." He sat down in the chair beside the bed. He put his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. He sat like that for a long moment, not crying, just holding something that was too heavy for a standing position. Sophia didn't move. She just waited. After a while he raised his head. "One condition," he said. She looked at him. "This is not a debt. Not between you and me. Not recorded anywhere. Not owed." He held her gaze. "This is one person helping another. That's it. No other name for it." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's all I ever wanted it to be," she said. He nodded once. She put the phone to her ear. The call had stayed connected. She said, "I'd like to speak to someone in patient financial services. Now, please." Ethan looked at his daughter. Lily slept on her hand curled near her cheek, entirely unaware of the thing that had just shifted in the room around her. She had drawn the three of them at the table. She had drawn Sophia with her hair down. She had put herself in the picture, holding the camera, ready to capture something worth keeping. Ethan looked at that drawing folded on the bedside table. I thought about his wife, about the way Claire had always said that the bravest thing a person could do was change their mind with integrity. Not cave, not surrender. Change. From one true thing to another truer thing with full awareness of what you were giving up and what you were gaining. He thought he might finally understand what she'd meant. Down the hall, a phone rang. Somewhere outside, it had started to rain, the soft, indifferent rain of early spring in Montana, the kind that came through without apology and left everything. It touched a little cleaner. Sophia spoke quietly into her phone. Ethan reached out and touched his daughter's hand, and she shifted in her sleep, and her fingers curled around his, without waking, with the automatic trust of someone who knew, even unconscious, who was there. He stayed. He didn't let go. And in the quiet of that room, with the rain against the glass, and Sophia's voice low and steady on the phone, and Lily's fingers wrapped around his. Ethan Carter understood something he'd been resisting for weeks. Something he hadn't wanted to be true, because true things were the ones that could break you. He had let someone in. Not the way you let someone into a shop or a kitchen or a Thursday dinner. The other way. The dangerous way. The way you couldn't walk back from without knowing it as a specific loss. And what frightened him wasn't the having let her in. What frightened him was how right it felt, and how completely, almost immediately after feeling right. The second thing arrived, the thing that always arrived when something good settled into him since Claire died. The knowledge that good things ended. That the shape of his life had taught him with perfect consistency that the moments of rightness were the ones most precisely positioned to be taken away. He looked at his daughter's hand in his. He looked at Sophia across the room, making the call that he'd said no to, and then yes to, and that she'd said yes to before he'd asked. He thought this is where it gets complicated. He thought this was always where it was going to get complicated. And he held his daughter's hand, and he listened to the rain, and he didn't move. The surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks felt like a long time until it didn't. Until Ethan was standing in the shop on a Tuesday morning, counting the days on a mental calendar, and realizing that 6 weeks was actually 42 days, and 42 days was nothing. 42 days was a transmission rebuild, and a dozen oil changes, and 2 school science projects, and 6 Thursday dinners, and 100 moments of his daughter being alive and loud and correcting his cooking methodology, and then a morning where they would put her under anesthesia and open her chest. He did not let himself think past the surgery. He had learned after Claire that the mind needed boundaries the same way a river needed banks. Without them, everything flooded. Lily came home from the hospital on a Thursday. She had a list of activity restrictions, a new medication schedule, and a follow-up appointment in 2 weeks with the Denver specialist who had reviewed her case and concurred with Dr. Renner's recommendation. She handled all of this with the pragmatic acceptance that she handled most hard things by absorbing the information, asking 3 precise questions, and then moving forward without looking back at the thing she'd just absorbed. Her 3 questions had been, can I still use the camera? Can I still do homework at the shop? And will the scar be interesting or just boring? Dr. Renner had told her yes, and probably interesting. She'd said good enough and started getting dressed. Ethan had stood in this corner of the hospital room watching this and felt the particular kind of pride that was also grief. The kind that came from watching someone small carry something large with more grace than you had any right to expect. Sophia drove them home from Billings. Ethan had his truck, but Sophia had simply appeared in the hospital discharge area with her car running, and Lily had walked directly to Sophia's passenger door with her hospital bracelet still on her wrist, and Ethan had looked at his truck, and then at the 2 of them, and gotten in the back without a word. Lily talked the entire 40 miles. She described in detail a nurse named Darnell who had showed her card tricks at 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep, and a woman in the next room who had a laugh so loud it came through the wall, and a Jell-O cup that she had strong opinions about. She talked the way she always talked when she was processing something fast and sideways, circling the thing she was actually feeling by describing everything around it. Sophia drove and listened, and responded to every single observation Lily made with the full attention of someone who understood without being told what the talking was actually for. Ethan watched them from the back seat and said almost nothing. At home. Lily went to her room to call a school friend and report on the situation which she'd described to Ethan as probably the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me, medically speaking. Ethan stood in the kitchen and looked at the table, and Sophia stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, and they were quiet for a moment, with the particular weight of the last 72 hours settling around them. "You should eat something," Sophia said. "I'm not hungry." "That's not what I said." She moved to the refrigerator and opened it with the ease of someone who had spent enough time in this kitchen to know where things were. She pulled out eggs and cheese and the half block of butter Lily always complained was running low. "Sit down." "Sophia." "Ethan." She said his name with the flat, quiet authority of someone who had made a decision and was not revisiting it. "Sit down." He sat down. She made eggs. She did it without asking him how he wanted them, because she'd been paying attention for weeks, and she knew. She put the plate in front of him with coffee, and then sat across from him at the table where 3 plates had become the standard arrangement. Except tonight, Lily was on the phone, and the 3rd plate was empty. He ate. He hadn't realized until the first bite how hollow he was, not just hungry, but depleted in some deeper way that the last 3 days had carved out of him. She watched him eat without making it a performance of watching. "Thank you," he said when he was halfway through, "for being there, at the hospital." "You don't need to thank me for that. I know, I'm doing it anyway." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "How are you really not managing?" "Not fine, actually." He looked at his plate. "Scared," he said. "I've been scared before. I know what it feels like. This feels like that." He looked up at her. "I keep doing the math. The thing where you calculate the odds and the timeline and the what-if scenarios. And every time I get to the part where the outcome is bad, I stop the calculation and start over from the beginning. I've been doing that for 3 days." "I know," she said quietly. "I could see you doing it." "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who does the same thing." He looked at her. "I run probability assessments in my head constantly," she said. "Worst case, best case, most likely case. It's how I function in high-stakes situations. I think I've been doing it since I was a child." She paused. "My therapist says it's a control mechanism." "You have a therapist?" "I have had 4. The current one is the first one I've been honest with." A beat. "She's extraordinary. Something about the straightforwardness of it. The no apology, no softening delivery of information about herself that most people would hedge into invisibility settled something in him." "What does she say about the probability assessments?" "That the function of them is to prepare for loss, not to prevent it. That I'm always pre-experiencing the worst outcome, so that when good things happen, part of me is already standing in the rubble ready to rebuild." She looked at her coffee. "She says it's why good things have a hard time landing for me. I'm already past them before they arrive." He was quiet for a moment. "Does it work, knowing that?" "Some days." She looked up at him. "Some days I can catch myself doing it and put it down. Other days I can't. The trick she gave me is to ask what's true right now, not tomorrow, not 6 weeks from now, right now." He thought about that. "What's true right now?" he repeated. "What's true right now," she said, "is that Lily is on the phone in her room being irritatingly brave and highly opinionated about hospital jello. And you ate something. And you're not alone in this kitchen." He looked at her. She held his gaze. "That's all. Just that." He nodded slowly. Something in him released an increment of tension. Not all of it, not close to all of it, but a real increment. Enough to breathe a little differently. "What's true right now?" he said. Okay, she agreed. Lily came back into the kitchen 20 minutes later and announced that her friend Maya had described the whole situation as incredibly dramatic, and that Lily had agreed, but also informed Maya that it was manageable because that was the accurate word. She then looked at the empty plate in front of Ethan and the coffee and Sophia across the table and said with complete satisfaction, "Good," as if she'd arranged the entire evening herself. Then she asked for pancakes. Sophia laughed before Ethan did. He let himself laugh too. 2 weeks, Sophia did something she had not done in the preceding weeks of Thursday dinners and hospital waiting rooms and kitchen table conversations. She arrived on a Tuesday morning with a second coffee and an expression Ethan recognized as the one she wore when she'd been thinking about something long enough that it had worn a groove. She sat on the stool. He was already under the Silverado's cousin, a different Silverado, same problems, and he slid out when he heard her come in. "What?" he said. "Good morning to you too," she said. "You have a thing on your face." She touched her face instinctively, then caught herself and gave him the flat look. "I made a decision." "Tell me." "I'm not going back to San Francisco." She held his gaze. "I told the board this morning. I'm establishing a satellite operations base. The company has the infrastructure for it. We've been running hybrid since before I took over. My VP will handle in person when I need him to. I'll fly for board meetings and major negotiations. But my base?" She stopped. My base is here. He looked at her. In Blackridge, she clarified in case there was any confusion. I know what here means. She held the coffee cup. Say something. How did the board take it? 4 were supportive, 2 were not. 1 is waiting to see how the stock responds. She paused. The stock hasn't moved, which tells me the board members who objected were objecting for personal reasons and not financial ones, which I already suspected. And you're okay with that? The objectors. They'll adapt. They always do. She looked at him. That's not what I'm asking. He knew it wasn't. He'd known since the first word. He was buying time the way he always bought time, by answering the facts before he answered the thing under the facts. Lily's going to be impossible, he said. I'm counting on it. She'll want to redesign the rental car situation into something permanent immediately. She texted me an apartment listing 2 days ago. I didn't mention it because I hadn't decided yet. He stared at her. She knew before me. She had opinions. She also had access to real estate apps, apparently. She's 9. She's very capable. He stood looking at her for a long moment. The morning light was coming through the bay door, and somewhere down Maple Street a dog was barking at something with total commitment, and the town was doing its Tuesday thing around them entirely unaware. Sophia, he said. I know, she said. This is, I know. If you're here, if you actually stay here, things are going to change, she said. Yes, I know. She held his gaze. I've been thinking about that for 6 weeks. I've been thinking about what it means and what it costs and what it asks from both of us and from Lily. I've thought about it every way I know how to think about something. She set the coffee down. And what I keep coming back to is that the reason I've been happy here, genuinely actually happy, not the performed version I used to confuse with real happiness, is because of what's here. Not the mountains, not the quiet, the people in this shop and in that kitchen. She paused. You and Lily. He looked at the floor, then back at her. I'm not asking you to, she started. I know what you're not asking, he said. Then what are you thinking? I thought about what was true right now. He applied the therapist's test, the one she'd given him without knowing she was giving it to him. What was true right now was that Sophia Whitmore was standing in his shop on a Tuesday morning, having already made a decision that he was the last to know about the last among himself. Lily and his 9-year-old daughter's secret real estate searches, and what he felt about it was not complicated. Under all the reasons it was complicated, what he actually felt was simple and immediate, and not subject to the probability assessments. I think, he said slowly, that Lily's going to be genuinely insufferable about being right. Sophia's face did the thing. The real smile. The one that changed everything in it. She's going to be absolutely unbearable. She's going to bring it up every single day for a year. Minimum. He almost smiled. Then he did. Then he looked at her, at this woman who had been in a frozen ravine in February and was now standing in his shop in April, having rearranged her billion-dollar life around a kitchen table, and he felt something he'd been keeping at arm's length for months finally arrive. Not love, not yet, or not in the word. In the feeling that was the start of the word. The specific warmth of someone who had decided that you were where they wanted to be. Okay, he said. Okay. She looked at him the same way she'd looked at him the first day. Like the word surprised her by being exactly what it needed to be. Okay, he said again. Come back. Stay. She exhaled slowly. All right. But Lily picks the apartment. Obviously. And she's going to want to take your picture. She already asked, last week. He shook his head. I didn't know any of this was happening. You were very focused on the Silverado. He went back under the Silverado. She sat back on the stool, and between one moment and the next, something that had been a careful, provisional, heavily qualified thing became simply a thing. Not announced, not declared, just shifted into a new shape that both of them recognized, and neither of them needed to name immediately. The surgery date arrived, April 23rd, a Tuesday. They drove to Denver the day before, so Lily could meet the surgical team and do the preoperative assessments. Sophia flew in and met them at the hospital. She had booked a hotel near the hospital for all three of them. 2 rooms side by side. And when Ethan saw the rooms, he looked at her, and she looked back at him with the expression she used when she'd anticipated his objection and decided to preempt it. "One condition," she said before he could speak. He waited. "This is not a debt. Not between us. Not recorded. Not owed. One person helping another." She held his gaze. "Those were your words." He looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his room key. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Lily had no opinion about the hotel rooms because she was busy charming the preoperative nursing staff into explaining every piece of equipment in the pre-op area in detail. By 7 that evening, she had a working understanding of the monitoring systems and a very high opinion of a nurse named Patricia, who had the same quality as Darnell, the card trick nurse, that particular quality of treating children like people which Lily responded to with the full force of her personality. At 8 that evening, Lily was in bed in her hotel room, and Ethan and Sophia were in the small sitting area between the 2 rooms, and the night before the surgery had a quality to it that was specific and unlike anything else. Not silent, not loud, just full the way important things were full. "She's going to be fine," Sophia said. "Yeah." "The surgeon has done this procedure 240 times. Lily asked her. She told her directly. He looked up. She asked the surgeon. She asked the surgeon. The surgeon answered. They had a very thorough conversation. Lily told her she had questions because she needed complete information to make an accurate risk assessment. Despite everything, he almost smiled. She said that. Those exact words. He leaned his head back, closed his eyes, opened them. "Ethan." Sophia's voice was quiet. "I'm okay." "I know you are." She leaned forward. "I want to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." He looked at her. "When I was in that ravine," she said, "and I heard your voice through the broken window, I didn't know who you were. I didn't know your name or your life or any of this. But your voice had something in it that—" She stopped, found the word. "That I hadn't heard in a long time. Something that wasn't calculating anything. It was just there, just present." She held his gaze. "I've spent the last 3 months trying to understand what that quality is, why it matters to me, why I keep coming back to it." He waited. "I think it's integrity," she said quietly. "Not the word people use in press releases. The actual thing. The alignment of what you believe with what you do in a moment when nobody's watching and there's nothing to gain." She paused. "You had it in the ravine. You have it at that workbench. You have it every time Lily looks at you." She looked at him steadily. "I want to be someone who has it too. I think being around you is making me better at it." He was quiet for a long time. "You have it," he said. "I'm working on it." "No." He looked at her directly. "You already have it. You had it when you came back and told me the truth about who you were. You had it when you told me about the plan you had to help me that you decided not to execute. You had it in that hospital room when you called financial services, and I walked in and you looked at me without hiding it." He held her gaze. "You've had it this whole time. You just didn't recognize it because it looked different than you expected." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes went very bright, and she looked away, and he let her have that moment without comment, which was the only right thing to do. After a while she said, "Thank you." "I mean it," he said. "I know." She looked back at him. "That's why it matters." They sat together in the sitting area for another hour, not talking much. The silence between them, the kind that had been built over months of proximity and honesty and Thursday evenings and hospital waiting rooms. The kind of silence that was actually full of everything that had already been said. At 10 o'clock, Ethan went to Lily's room to check on her. She was supposed to be asleep. She was not asleep. She was lying in the dark with her eyes open and Claire's camera on the pillow beside her. "Can't sleep," he said. "A little nervous," she admitted. "Not a lot, just a little." He sat on the edge of the bed. "That's reasonable. Is it normal to feel okay and nervous at the same time?" "Yeah, that's what brave feels like usually." She was quiet for a moment. "Is Sophia still here?" "In the next room." Lily nodded. She looked at this camera. Can I tell you something? Always. She was quiet for a moment, choosing. Then, I used to think that after Mom there wasn't room, like the room was full and that was it. She traced the edge of the camera with one finger. But lately I think I was wrong about that. He didn't say anything. Room doesn't work like that, she said. I think it actually gets bigger. The more people, the more room. She looked at him. Does that make sense? He put his hand over hers on the camera. Yeah, sweetheart, he said. It does. Sophia fits, Lily said simply. He looked at his daughter. At her gray-green eyes in the dark, clear and certain, and 9 years old. Yeah, he said. She does. Okay. Lily turned over and pulled the blanket up. Good night, Dad. Good night. He sat with her until her breathing slowed and the nervousness went out of her body with sleep, and then he sat a little longer. He held the camera in his hands in the dark. It was older than Lily by 8 years. Claire had carried it in her 30s, taken it to every school trip and art show and long weekend in the mountains. It still had a roll of film in it 3/4 used that he'd never developed because the last pictures on it were Claire's, and he didn't know what he'd do when he saw them. He set the camera back on the pillow beside Lily's sleeping head. He looked at his daughter for one more moment. Then he went out. Sophia was still in the sitting area. She looked up when he came out and read his face. She's okay, she said. She's okay. He sat back down. She told me room gets bigger. The more people, the more room. Sophia looked at him. She said that... those words. She pressed her lips together, looked away, looked back. She's extraordinary. She really is. The night settled around them. At some point, Sophia fell asleep in the chair, just tilted her head back and went under the way people did when they'd been running on adrenaline for days, and the moment they stopped moving, the body settled its debts. He got the blanket from his room and put it over her and then sat back across from her. He looked at her sleeping. I thought about integrity. The alignment of what you believe with what you do. He thought about the ravine in February and the way he'd gone down into it without thinking, because the thinking would have been beside the point. He thought about 40 years of being a person who did things because they were right and absorbed the cost of that without complaint, because the cost was just part of the definition. He thought that he had been alone for a long time. Not lonely, there was a difference, and Claire had taught him that. Lonely was a need. Alone was a condition. He'd managed the condition. He'd been good at it. He'd built a life that was whole inside its boundaries. But looking at Sophia asleep in a chair across from him, with a blanket he'd put there in a hotel room next door to his daughter who had said, "Room gets bigger." Ethan Carter thought about the distinction between managing a condition and choosing something better. I was still thinking about it when he fell asleep in his own chair. Surgery morning was 5:45 a.m. They brought Lily into pre-op at 6:15. She was wearing a hospital gown, and her hair was in the braid Sophia had put in at 5 in the morning. Lily had requested this with the specificity of someone who had given the matter full consideration, and she had the camera around her neck. The pre-op nurse looked at the camera. "She's a photographer," Ethan said. The nurse smiled. "We'll keep it safe at the nurse's station." Lily unlooped the camera and held it out. Then she stopped. "1 second," she said, and she held the camera up and pointed it at Ethan and Sophia, standing side by side at the edge of the pre-op area. The shutter clicked. One picture. Film, no preview, no knowing how it would come out. "Okay," Lily said, and handed the camera to the nurse. They wheeled her back at 6:44. Ethan stood at the point where the corridor turned, and she couldn't see him anymore. He stood there with both hands at his sides and watched until the gurney went around the corner. Sophia put her hand in his. He held on. They sat in the surgical waiting room for 4 hours and 22 minutes. Sophia brought coffee from the cafeteria at hour 2. Ethan didn't drink his. She drank hers and half of his, and didn't comment on the fact. They talked in intervals, sometimes long conversations, sometimes just observations, sometimes nothing. At one point Sophia said, "Tell me something about Claire." He looked at her. Something good, she said. Something that made you fall in love with her. I was quiet for a moment. Then, she used to leave notes. Not love notes, just notes. If she was out when I got home, she'd leave a note on the counter that said something like, "Olives in the fridge I strongly recommend." Or, "Your truck sounds like it's trying to tell you something." Just observations. Things she noticed. He paused. When she got sick, she kept doing it. Right up until about 2 weeks before. Little notes on the counter. The last one said, "Lily drew a horse today. It looked like a horse." He stopped. "I still have it." Sophia was quiet. She was the kind of person, he said, who noticed everything and wanted you to notice it too. Not because she was controlling, because she thought the world was interesting and she wanted to share it. He looked at his hands. "Lily has that." "She does," Sophia said. "And somewhere along the line," he said carefully, "so do you." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The way you listened to Lily talk about the hamster and the fire drill. The way you asked her what she takes pictures of. The way you remember everything she says." He met her eyes. "You notice things, and you want people to feel that you noticed." She held his gaze for a long beat. "Nobody said that to me before." "Doesn't mean it's not true." She looked down, looked back up. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Accurate observations aren't a gift," he said. "They're just accurate." The surgeon came out at 11:06. Dr. Vasquez, the Denver specialist, mid-50s, the surgeon, with 240 procedures, walked into the waiting room, still in her scrubs, and found them immediately the way surgeons do when they know what they're walking toward. "Mr. Carter," she said. He stood. "The procedure went well," she said. "Lily is in recovery. She'll be sedated for another couple of hours, and then we'll bring her around gradually. The structural repair is exactly what we targeted. She's going to need recovery time and monitoring, and there will be ongoing cardiology follow-up. But Mr. Carter, we have every reason to believe she is going to have a completely normal life." He stood still. He heard the words. He stood still for one more second, absorbing them, and then he sat down, because his legs decided to before he did. Sophia put her hand on his shoulder. He put his hand over hers. He pressed his lips together and looked at the ceiling and breathed. "Thank you," he said, to the doctor, to the room, to whatever had arranged the sequence of events that had led from a frozen ravine in February to this waiting room on an April morning. "Thank you." Dr. Vasquez said they could see her in an hour. She left. Ethan sat in the chair with Sophia's hand still on his shoulder and his hand still over hers, and the waiting room moved around them. Other people with other stories. Nurses passing phones, ringing distantly, and none of it reached them for a while. "She's going to be okay," Sophia said quietly. "Yeah," he said. "Completely normal life." "Yeah." He turned to look at her. She had been up since 5 in the morning and had barely slept the night before, and she had been running on purpose and coffee and will for 11 days, and right now in this fluorescent hospital waiting room. None of that was visible in her face. What was visible was something simpler. Relief. Real, unmanaged, uncontrolled relief. The kind that belonged to someone who had something to lose. He looked at her face for a long moment. "I have to tell you something," he said. She waited. "That condition I put on the money," he said. "One person helping another. No debt, no record." "I remember," she said. "I've been thinking about it wrong," he said. "The whole framework, the way I've been treating exchange and debt, and what people owe each other." He looked at his hands. "I've been treating connection like it was a transaction. Like if I let someone do something for me, I was importing debt into the relationship and debt would corrode it." He paused. "But that's not what happened here." She was very still. "What happened here is that you did something because you cared," he said. "And I did something because I cared. And Lily drew 3 people at a table and gave you the picture. And you flew across the country at 6 in the morning and sat in a hospital waiting room for 4.5 hours. He looked at her. "None of that is transaction. None of that has a ledger. It's just people." He paused. "People who chose each other." She held his gaze. "I've been alone for 3 years," he said. "Not badly, not broken, just alone. And I think I made a philosophy out of it because philosophy was easier than admission. He let that sit. The admission being that I missed having someone. Ethan. I'm not finished. She waited. I missed having someone, he said again. And then a woman crashed a car into a frozen ravine and I went down after her and I didn't even know her name. And now she's... He looked at Sophia steadily. Here, in a surgical waiting room, with Lily's braid in her hair from 5 in the morning. He paused. I don't have the math for that. Good, she said softly. Neither do I. He looked at her for a moment. She's going to be impossible when she wakes up, he said. She's going to want to know everything about the surgery in technical detail. I know. She'll ask the nurses. She'll ask the surgeon. Twice. At least. He almost smiled. We should have coffee ready when she's alert enough. The cafeteria coffee is terrible. She doesn't know that yet. She'll know immediately. He looked at Sophia. At this woman with Lily's hair product on her hands, and 4 hours of not quite sleep behind her eyes, and $4 billion in assets, and no idea what to do with her hands when she was sitting still, so she always found something to hold a coffee cup, a phone, the edge of a chair. He reached over and took her hand. Not the shoulder. Her hand. With the specific intention that hands carry. She looked at their hands, and then at his face. I didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. She held on. Outside the waiting room window, Denver was doing its morning traffic moving clouds, breaking the ordinary continuous motion of a city that didn't know or care what was happening on the 4th floor of one of its hospitals. But on the 4th floor, in a yellow waiting room with bad coffee and fluorescent light, something had finished being careful and started being real. Not with a declaration, not with a named moment, just a hand held. And outside April kept going, unaware that somewhere in Montana, a repair shop that smelled like motor oil was waiting to be a home again, and a little girl with a camera full of undeveloped film was waking up with a repaired heart and a drawing to finish, and 2 people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances were sitting quietly in the evidence of what that finding had made. Room gets bigger, Lily had said. She had no idea how right she was. Lily woke up arguing. Not loudly, the anesthesia still had its hands on her muffling the edges, but with full conviction, even half-conscious, she was pushing back against the nurse who was trying to get her to rate her pain on a 1 to 10 scale. That scale is too subjective, Lily said, her voice thick and slow. It doesn't account for individual pain tolerance variables. The nurse looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Sophia. Sophia pressed her lips together very hard. She's fine, Ethan said. Lily turned her head and found him the way she always found him, that immediate automatic tracking. Her eyes were heavy, and her face was pale, and there was a tube in her hand, and monitors on her chest. And the first thing she said to him was, "Did it work?" "It worked," he said. She closed her eyes. Opened them again. All of it. All of it. She looked past him. Sophia. Right here, Sophia said, stepping up to the other side of the bed. Lily looked at her for a moment, with the slow, serious assessment of someone operating at 50% capacity and still refusing to miss anything. "You stayed," she said. "Of course I stayed." "The whole time?" "The whole time." Lily nodded, once satisfied, and closed her eyes again. "I want to know about the procedure," she said, eyes still closed. "Everything, when I'm more awake." "Deal," Sophia said. "And I want the cafeteria coffee." "It's terrible," Ethan said. "I know. I want to experience it anyway." He sat on the edge of the chair beside her bed and put his hand over hers on the blanket, and she didn't open her eyes, but her fingers moved under his, curling around 2 of them, and he stayed exactly like that for a long time. Sophia stood on the other side. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She was simply there, present and steady, the way she had learned, or maybe always known, and only recently allowed to be. The recovery took 12 days in Denver. On day 3, Lily started asking the surgical team detailed questions about the septal myectomy procedure using terminology she had sourced from a medical reference website on her phone, which she had apparently been studying since her diagnosis. Dr. Vasquez came in on day 4 specifically to talk to her about it and stayed 40 minutes. Lily later described this as the best conversation I've had in a medical setting, which Ethan pointed out was a low bar, and Lily pointed out that low bars were still bars. On day 5, Sophia rented a larger hotel suite so they could all stop going back and forth between 2 rooms. She presented this as a logistical decision. Ethan accepted it as a logistical decision. Lily said, "Finally," with the tone of someone who had been waiting for the adults to reach an obvious conclusion. On day 7, Lily asked Sophia to teach her how to run a board meeting. Sophia said, "Right now," Lily said, "I have time." Sophia pulled up a chair, and for the next 2 hours, she walked Lily through the structure of a board meeting agenda setting. Stakeholder management, the particular art of asking questions that redirect a conversation without appearing to redirect it. Lily absorbed all of it with the focused intensity she applied to everything that genuinely interested her, and at the end she said, "That's basically what I do with Dad when I want him to agree to something." Sophia looked at Ethan. Ethan thought about every conversation he'd had with his daughter in the last 4 years. "I've been managed," he said. "Expertly," Sophia said. On day 9, Lily slept most of the afternoon, and Ethan and Sophia sat in the suite's small living area, and the quiet between them was different from the quiet they'd been carrying since surgery morning. It had a different texture. Something had been decided in that waiting room in the hand-holding, and the things said and unsaid, and both of them knew it, and the knowledge sat between them now, not as pressure, but as settled weight. The good kind. The kind that came from something being real. "I want to ask you something," Ethan said. She looked up from her laptop. "All right." "The apartment Lily sent you, the listing." She closed the laptop. "Yes. Is that still what you're thinking, apartment?" She looked at him carefully. "What are you thinking?" I was quiet for a moment. "The building next to the shop. The one that's been empty for 2 years. It used to be an apartment above a retail space. The apartment's still livable. I looked at it once when I was thinking about renting it as storage, but it's got windows on 3 sides and good light, and someone put in decent floors at some point." She was very still. "It's not San Francisco," he said. "No," she said. "It's above a repair shop in a town of 4,000 people in Montana. I know where it is. You'd be able to hear the impact wrench through the floor sometimes. I run board meetings with $200 million on the line. I can handle an impact wrench." He looked at her. "I'm not offering it as a charity case. The owner's been trying to rent it for 18 months. You'd pay market rate, which in Blackridge is not San Francisco." "I know. I'm just saying it exists. If you were looking for something more permanent than a rental car." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something in her face went through several things quickly. The controlled version, the deciding version, and then the version that was just her, unmanaged and direct. "Are you asking me to stay?" she said. He held her gaze. "Yeah," he said. "I am." She was quiet for one beat. Just one. "Then yes," she said. He nodded. "Okay." "That's it." "Okay. I'll call the owner tomorrow." She laughed, the real one, the unguarded one, and he smiled and looked away, and the afternoon light came through the hotel window, and neither of them said anything more about it, because it was already decided, and decided things didn't need extra words. They came home to Blackridge on a Thursday. Of course it was a Thursday. Lily rode most of the way from Denver in the back seat with her sketchbook, drawing quietly with the focused energy of someone who had been mostly still for 12 days and had a significant backlog of things to put on paper. She didn't say much. She looked out the window at the mountains coming up as they crossed into Montana, and she said once, "It looks the same." "It does," Sophia said from the passenger seat. "I thought it might look different after, everything. Places don't usually change," Sophia said. "People do." Lily considered this. "Did I change?" Ethan glanced in the rear view. "A little." "Good change or bad change?" "Hard to tell yet," he said. "You're still annoying." Lily threw a pen at the back of his headrest. He caught it without looking, which had always impressed her, and always would, and he heard her small exhale of reluctant amusement and the quiet rustle of her going back to the sketchbook. Sophia was watching him from the passenger seat. He looked at her briefly. She looked away first, which was unusual enough that it mattered. There was something in her face he hadn't seen before. Something soft around the edges, like she was letting the drive be what it was, without managing it into any other shape. He thought she looks like someone coming home. The thought surprised him. Not because it was wrong, because it was exactly right. Ray had kept the shop running in Ethan's absence. Not perfectly. Ray was good, but not Ethan. Good. And there was a backlog that made Ethan's jaw tighten slightly when he walked through the bay door the next morning and saw the board. But the lights were on, and the invoices were filed, and the Briley truck that George had finally brought in was sitting in Bay 2, which meant Ray had at least triaged correctly. Ethan put on his work shirt and got started. Sophia came by at noon. She didn't have coffee from the gas station this time. She had coffee from a new place, a small cafe that had opened on 3rd Street while they were in Denver, which Blackridge had apparently decided to acquire in their absence. "It's called the Ridgeline," she said, handing him a cup. "The owner is a woman named Carol, who used to run a restaurant in Missoula and moved here for her daughter's school situation." He tried the coffee. It was genuinely good. "You already know her story. I talked to her for 20 minutes while she made the coffee." Sophia sat on the stool. "She's interesting. She did the whole thing herself, financing renovation equipment, on a budget that would make your loan look generous." He looked at her. "You're not going to—" "I'm not going to do anything," Sophia said. "I just think she's interesting." A beat. "I did leave her my card, in case she ever needed advice on scaling a small food service business." "That's friendly," she said firmly. He looked at her, at the way she was already 4 weeks back in Blackridge, becoming part of the texture of the place, knowing Carol from the new cafe, knowing that George Briley's truck had finally made it in, knowing the school's spring schedule because Lily had given it to her and she'd memorized it because that was what she did with information she cared about. "The apartment's ready," he said. She looked at him. "When did you—" "Yesterday, while you were setting up the satellite office situation." He picked up the coffee. "The owner repainted. It looks decent." Her expression did something complicated. "You arranged for the repainting." "I called the owner and mentioned it needed it." "Ethan." "Market rate," he said. "The paint's on him. Standard rental practice." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're not as difficult as you pretend to be." "I'm exactly as difficult as I pretend to be. You arranged for the apartment to be painted before I moved in." The paint was peeling. It was a maintenance issue. "Ethan." He went back to the Briley truck. She moved into the apartment on a Saturday in mid-May. She didn't have much, or rather she had a great deal in San Francisco in storage and in the house she'd maintained there, but what she brought to Blackridge fit in 4 medium boxes and 2 suitcases, which she carried up the stairs herself before Ethan appeared from the shop below, and took the last 2 boxes without being asked. Lily supervised. She stood at the top of the stairs with her arms crossed and directed the placement of everything with the authority of someone who had strong opinions about furniture arrangement and no patience for suboptimal spatial decisions. "The desk should face the window," she said. "I know," Sophia said. "And the bookshelf on the east wall, not the north wall. The north wall gets afternoon shadow." "How do you know which wall is east?" "Dad taught me." Lily looked at Ethan. "You should put the heavy box down. You're going to hurt your shoulder again." "My shoulder is fine." "It's the same shoulder from the ravine." He put the box down. Sophia looked at him. "The ravine." "She worries," he said. "You hurt your shoulder going down into the ravine," Lily said. "In February. He didn't tell anyone." "It was a minor. He iced it for a week and pretended he wasn't icing it." Lily looked at Sophia. "You should know these things. He doesn't volunteer medical information." "I'll remember that," Sophia said seriously. "I'm standing right here," Ethan said. "We know," they said at the same time. He looked at the two of them standing in Sophia's new apartment above his shop, operating in easy, fluent coordination, finishing each other's implicit points, and he felt something he hadn't felt in so long that it took him a moment to identify it. Fullness. Not the temporary kind. The kind that had weight and stayed. He picked the box back up, shoulder and all, and carried it to where Lily pointed. That evening, the three of them had dinner in Sophia's apartment, takeout from the diner because the kitchen wasn't stocked yet, and sat on the floor because the table wasn't assembled yet, and ate out of containers while Lily explained to Sophia in systematic detail why the diner's mashed potatoes were superior to all other mashed potatoes within a 40-mile radius. Sophia ate the mashed potatoes and agreed that they were excellent, and Lily said, "I know," with the satisfaction of someone whose assessments were consistently validated by evidence. At 8:30, Lily looked at the window which faced the street and the edge of the shop and the beginning of the Black Ridge main drag, and she said, "I want to take a picture." She had the camera. She had gotten the film developed while they were in Denver, handed it off to a 1-hour place near the hospital, and picked it up on day 10 of the recovery. She had looked at the pictures alone first in the hotel room, and then shown them to Ethan one at a time. Most of them were what he expected. The shop, the mountains, things around town, a series of pictures of early spring light that were better than they had any right to be from a 9-year-old with a film camera. The fox she'd almost gotten. The kitchen table from a low angle that made it look important. And then near the end of the roll, 2 pictures he hadn't expected. The first was from surgery morning. Lily had pointed the camera at him and Sophia in the pre-op area and clicked the shutter, and the picture had come out clear and centered and slightly overexposed from the hospital lighting. But real, the two of them side by side, his hands at his sides, her hand half raised toward him, both of them looking at Lily behind the camera with the same expression. Not a posed expression, the honest one, the one people wore when they were looking at someone they loved. He had looked at that picture for a long time. Lily had not said anything. She had just watched him look at it. The second unexpected picture was from even earlier, from a Thursday dinner, late February, before the hospital and before Denver and before anything was named or decided. Lily had taken it from across the kitchen with the camera balanced on the counter on a timer, and it showed the 3 of them at the table without any of them knowing they were being photographed. Ethan was talking. Sophia was listening with her chin in her hand. Lily herself was in the frame, looking between the 2 of them with an expression on her face that was unmistakably satisfaction. She had known before either of them did. Of course she had. He had looked at that picture and thought about Claire, about the notes on the counter, about Lily drew a horse today. It looked like a horse. He had thought about the camera on the pillow and the roll of film he'd never developed, the last pictures Claire had taken before she couldn't. He had thought Claire would have liked Sophia. And then, more quietly, Claire would have wanted this. Now in the half-assembled apartment on a Saturday evening in May, Lily picked up the camera with the new roll she'd loaded and pointed it at Ethan and Sophia sitting on the floor with takeout containers. "Stay there," she said. "Lily," Ethan started. "Stay there." She adjusted something on the camera. "You're not looking right. Look at each other, not at me." "We're not going to Dad," the voice of absolute authority. "Look at Sophia." He looked at Sophia. She was looking at him already, and when he met her eyes, she didn't look away. She had a fork in one hand and a takeout container in the other, and the new apartment was full of boxes, and she was sitting on the floor, and she looked more at ease than he had ever seen her. More present. More herself. The shutter clicked. "Good," Lily said, satisfied, and went back to her mashed potatoes. Sophia looked down at her food. He saw the corner of her mouth move. "She's been planning that since February," he said quietly. "Longer probably," Sophia said. 3 weeks after Sophia moved in, Ethan did the thing he'd been thinking about for 2 months. He developed Claire's film. He took it to the same place in Billings where Lily had gotten her roll done, a proper photo lab that still handled analog, and he drove there on a Tuesday morning when the shop was slow, and Ray was in, and he dropped it off and drove back without looking at it. He picked it up the following week. He sat in the truck in the parking lot of the photo lab for 7 minutes before he opened the envelope. The first 12 pictures were from before she got sick. A trip to Glacier they'd taken when Lily was 2, a birthday party, an ordinary Tuesday with Lily in the backyard. Claire had the eye that Lily was developing, the instinct for finding the thing worth keeping in an ordinary moment. He went through them slowly. The last 4 pictures were from the hospital. Not the inside of the hospital. Claire had never wanted pictures of that. She'd taken them through the window of her room, and then 2 of Lily asleep in the chair beside her bed. And then, in the very last frame, one that hit him like a physical thing. She had taken a picture of Ethan, who was asleep in the chair on the other side of her bed, his head tilted back, one hand resting on the edge of the mattress. She had taken it without waking him. He was wearing the flannel shirt that he still owned, had been wearing in fact, the night of the accident in February. On the back of the photo in her handwriting she had written 4 words. He always stays. Always. He sat in the truck for a long time. He didn't cry. Or he did briefly in the way that felt more like release than grief, not the raw bottomless grief of the first year, but the clean, honest acknowledgement of someone who had been loved and known it and carried that knowledge faithfully forward. He looked at the photo for a long time. Then he put it carefully in the envelope with the others, started the truck, and drove home. That evening he knocked on the door of the apartment above the shop. Sophia opened it. She read his face immediately. She always read his face. She was better at it than anyone he'd ever known, and she stepped back to let him in without asking what was wrong. "Nothing's wrong," he said. I know, she said. "Sit down." He sat. He put the envelope on the table. "I got the film developed," he said. "Claire's last role." She sat across from him. She didn't reach for the envelope. "How are you?" "Good," he said. And he meant it, not the managing version, not the fine version, but the actual one. "Good, I think. There's a picture she took of me, at the end." He paused. She wrote something on the back. Sophia waited. She wrote, "He always stays. Always." He looked at the envelope. "I didn't know she'd taken it. I didn't know she'd written that." He was quiet for a moment. "I think she wanted me to find it, when I was ready." The apartment was very quiet. "She sounds like someone who knew you," Sophia said softly. "Better than I knew myself," he said. Sophia looked at the envelope, then at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Do you think she knew that you'd—" She stopped. "Found it. That you'd be okay after—" He thought about it. Honestly, the way he'd been trying to think about all of it since Denver. "I think she hoped," he said. "I think she made Lily the way she did on purpose, so that I'd have someone to stay for." He paused. "She was always thinking ahead like that." Sophia was very still. "And I think," he said carefully, "that she'd have been glad. About this. About you." He met Sophia's eyes. "I don't say that I'm not using it as a— I know," she said quietly. "I just wanted to tell you." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were very bright, and she was doing the thing, the controlled version, pulling it back, but less completely than usual. Some of it stayed visible. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me." He nodded. They sat in the quiet together. Outside, the May evening was going on the street, settling into its night rhythms, someone walking a dog past the shop, the particular low-level ambient sound of a small town winding down. "I want to ask you something," he said. She looked at him. "All right." "Earlier you asked me if I was asking you to stay. Back in Denver." "I remember." "I was," he said. "But I think I was asking smaller than I meant." She was very still. "I meant I want you here," he said. "Not in the apartment above the shop necessarily, not in any specific arrangement. I just—" He stopped. "Found it. I want you in the life, the actual life. The Tuesday mornings and the Thursday dinners and the school pickups and the boring oil changes and the conversations about nothing and the ones about everything. I want—" He paused. "I want what Lily said. Room that gets bigger." Sophia looked at him. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Can I tell you what I figured out in that waiting room on surgery morning?" "Yeah. I figured out that I have spent my entire adult life optimizing for outcomes," she said. "Managing variables, calculating risk, structuring situations, so that the result I wanted was the most likely result. I built a $4 billion company doing it. I became very good at it. She paused. And I walked into a garage in Black Ridge, Montana, and you don't do that. You don't manage. You don't optimize. You just show up and do the thing that needs doing. And it turns out that watching someone operate that way consistently over time is the most disorienting experience of my professional life. He almost smiled. Because I couldn't find the angle, she said. I couldn't find what you were calculating. And then I finally understood that you weren't calculating anything. That it was just you. And that you were just... She met his eyes. Exactly what you looked like. In the ravine, and in the shop, and at the kitchen table. The same person all the way through. That's not impressive, he said. That's just being a person. Ethan. Her voice was quiet and direct. It is the most impressive thing I have ever encountered, and I have encountered a great deal. He looked at her. I want the life too, she said. All of it. The Tuesday mornings, and the boring oil changes, and Lily telling me my spatial arrangements are suboptimal. She held his gaze. I want the life. He stood up from the table and came around to her side of it, and she stood up too, because she'd read where this was going, and she wasn't someone who waited for things to arrive when she could meet them. He put his hands on either side of her face, his mechanic's hands calloused and careful, and looked at her for one moment with the full, honest weight of everything the last 5 months had been. Then he kissed her. She kissed him back without hesitation, without management, without any version of the controlled presentation she wore everywhere else. Just her. Just this. When they pulled back, she was looking at him with the expression he'd first seen through a broken car window, that watching present clear-eyed quality that he'd spent 5 months learning was not just assessment. It was attention. It was the way she looked at things she'd decided mattered. Lily's going to be so insufferable about this, he said. She's been waiting since February, Sophia said. Longer, probably. Definitely longer, he laughed. The real kind, the easy, unguarded kind that used to be harder to find and lately was coming back to him with increasing regularity, like a muscle, remembering how to do something it had always been built for. She leaned her forehead against his. I'm not easy, she said quietly. I want you to know that going in. I work too much. I have opinions about everything. I will absolutely attempt to manage situations I should leave alone. I will probably try to optimize things that don't need optimizing. I know, he said. You should know. Sophia. He looked at her directly. I fix broken things for a living. I'm not afraid of complicated. She looked at him. Then she smiled, the real one, the full one, the one that changed everything in her face and made her look like the person she was under all the management and the measurement and the $4 billion and the board meetings. Just herself. Just the woman who had taken his name through a broken car window on the worst night of her recent life and filed it somewhere careful. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Downstairs the shop was dark and locked. Above it in the apartment with the east-facing bookshelf and the windows on 3 sides and the good floors someone had put in. At some point, 2 people were figuring out what it looked like when you stopped running from the right thing and just stood still inside it. 2 weeks later, Lily developed her second role. She took the prints out of the envelope one by one at the kitchen table. Ethan's kitchen table where they all ended up always, because it was the center of the thing and had been for months, and laid them out in a row. She studied them for a long time. Ethan and Sophia sat across from her, not rushing her because Lily's relationship with her pictures was private and serious and not something you hurried. Then she picked up one and held it across the table. It was the picture from Sophia's apartment. Saturday evening in May. The 2 of them on the floor with the takeout containers, looking at each other. It was a good picture. Better than good. The light was evening warm, and the composition was clean, and the expressions on their faces were the honest ones, not posed, not presented, just true. That's the best one I've taken, Lily said. Ethan looked at it. Yeah, he said. I think it is. I'm going to send it to a competition. She said it with complete matter-of-fact confidence, the way she said most things she'd already decided. The State Youth Photography Competition. The deadline is August. What's the category? Sophia asked. Lily looked at the picture. Home, she said simply. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Sophia reached across and squeezed Lily's hand once briefly, and Lily let her, which was its own kind of answer. Ethan looked at the picture on the table. At the two people in it who hadn't known the camera was there, caught in a moment that was nothing except ordinary and everything except nothing. He thought about Claire's handwriting on the back of a photograph. He thought about a frozen ravine and a broken window and a stranger's voice saying, "Stay awake." He thought about the distance between February and May and how much could change in that distance when you stopped measuring it in miles and started measuring it in choices. I thought about what it cost to stay in the hard moments and what it gave back slowly over time in ways you couldn't have predicted and didn't deserve to predict. You just had to do the staying and trust the accounting to work itself out. He thought about his daughter, who had known before he did, who had written her phone number on the back of a drawing, who had said room gets bigger and meant it as fact, not hope. He looked at Sophia across the table, at this complicated, brilliant, unoptimizable woman who had rearranged her billion-dollar life around a kitchen table in Montana and was currently having a very serious conversation with Lily about the technical merits of the photo submission, and he felt the fullness again. The real weighted, staying kind. That September, on a Sunday morning, Ethan walked into the kitchen and found a note on the counter. Not his handwriting. Not Lily's. Small, precise Sophia's. Coffee's ready. Lily's at Maya's until noon. The truck is making a sound I think you should investigate. I described it to Ray and he said, "That's an Ethan problem." Sounded important. Also, the Ridgeline has a new muffin. Carol says it's Montana Huckleberry. I strongly recommend. He stood at the counter with the note in his hand for a long time. He thought about a woman who had noticed everything and wanted you to notice it too. He thought about room getting bigger. He thought about what it meant to be found by someone, and to find them back, and to choose every day after that to stay in the finding. He put the note in the drawer where he kept the others, the small ones, the ordinary ones, the ones that accumulated over time into the shape of a life. Then he poured his coffee and went to look at the truck. Some things were always an Ethan problem. He was getting better at letting other things be shared ones. Outside, Blackridge was doing its Sunday morning slow and ordinary and entirely itself, and in the apartment above the shop, Sophia was on a call with her board and down the street. Lily was at Maya's house explaining something with her hands, and in the kitchen of the house on Maple, a man who had spent 3 years learning to be alone was standing at the counter with a cup of coffee and a note that someone had left because they wanted him to know they'd been there. He read it one more time. He folded it carefully. He put it in the drawer. And Ethan Carter, who had always stayed, who had climbed into a frozen ravine for a stranger and asked for nothing and walked away, before she could thank him, stood in his kitchen in the September light and understood finally and completely that the walking away had been the beginning and not the end. That the stranger had become someone who left notes. That the daughter who had always known too much had been exactly right. That the room had gotten bigger. And that the people who saved us are not always the ones with power or resources or the right answers at the right time. Sometimes they are simply the ones who, when the moment comes, choose to stay. And keep choosing it. Every ordinary, irreplaceable day.